I asked for an open relationship out of boredom. He agreed but warned he'd leave if he fell for someone else. 8 months later, he did. 8 months ago, I, 25 female, asked my partner, 28 male, for an open relationship because I got bored with him. There was nothing particularly wrong, but he just didn't excite me much. He agreed, but he warned me that there was a catch. If I catch feelings for someone else, I'm going to leave you for her. And that's exactly what happened. Now I want him back in my arms. He left me for his new partner, a woman around 28 to 29 years old. What can I do to win the love of my life back? Comments. Comment 1. Engel, that's the ultimate reverse card for this situation. Big ups your XOOP. Really? Comment 2. Yes, really. You played yourself. He didn't excite you, so you asked for an open relationship, and now you want him back when he caught feelings for someone else while in the open relationship that you asked for in the first place. You only have yourself to blame for this one. You should stay single for a while and grow up. Oopie. I don't want to be single, I want to prove to my boyfriend I can be better now. Comment 3. Il semble qu'il vous ait averti clairement qu'il ne voulait pas une relation ouverte et utiliserait l'ouverture de la vôtre comme une chance de rencontrer de nouvelles personnes pour se déplacer avec, et vous l'avez ignoré. There's really no fixing this without a time machine. Comment 4. Well. If it isn't the consequences of your own actions. 3. OP sowing. Ha 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 yes. Fuck yeah. OP reaping. Well this fucking sucks. What the fuck? OP. Why'd he wait 8 months to leave me then? Comment 5. It can take time to develop feelings. Why does time matter? Whether it was 8 days or 8 months, he told you the risks. Update 1 to 3 days later. Probably nobody asked for this, but here's an update. I was kicked out of his house last Sunday, that's 6 days now, and I miss him excruciatingly. I will do anything to get him to return to me, but he looks happy on social media with his new partner that I'm pretty sure he was cheating on me with. Anyway, I tried calling him, no answer. I saw him in public, and he pretended to not even know who I was. He won't acknowledge my existence, so I went to our former place just to talk, and things got hostile. His new girlfriend hates me for some reason. I didn't even know her, and she proceeded to try and attack me, while he tried to split us up and get me out the door. When he had his back turned, she maced me. And now he's trying to file a restraining order on me. What did I do wrong? She attacked me and pepper sprayed me. How can I convince him he's dating a psychopath? Comments. Comment 1. Correction. He was dating a psycho LOL. Leave that man alone. Learn from your fuck up and do better next time. Oop. Referring to me? Deleted. Duh. Mishi162. You brought this all on yourself. He didn't cheat on you, you asked for an open relationship. This is the result. He dumped you for someone that loves and respects him. The only course of action you have open to you now is to walk away and get therapy. OP, I'm in therapy already. Deleted. You need to find a better therapist cause this one's not working. Update 2. This will probably be the last update. The restraining order has been filed, and I am not allowed within 100 feet of my ex Harry and his new girlfriend Jess. I'm planning to move back to my home in Arizona and start over. They're happy, and I just want to find peace with myself. Thanks for everyone's advice and opinions. Yes, I was already in therapy, and I am still in therapy. Please, anyone my age or younger, listen to my advice. TikTok is not cool. Please delete it, it's done me nothing but harm, and other people's stupidity can really poison your minds. I'm living proof. Thank you, take care. Comments. Comment 1. To recap. You wanted an open relationship, he said yes, but told you if he felt a connection with someone else, then he would do the right thing and break off your relationship rather than have an emotional affair. You agreed he felt a connection with someone and realized you're insane. He was upfront with you that he wanted to end things you blame, wanting the open relationship on your ADHD because you were bored. You then try to claim he cheated when you're the one that wanted the open relationship. You went to his house to start a fight when you wouldn't leave their place. She rightfully maced you to make you leave. You call her a psycho even though you're the one that harassed them constantly. You think he was wrong for getting a restraining order against you even though you're the aggressor. You're now blaming TikTok for your actions. Did that sum it all up? Comment 2. This all started because TikTok told you to open your relationship? Honestly, though, I hope you're able to build yourself a solid mental foundation before falling into another relationship. Deleted. She would not have even seen anything on it if she herself was not actively searching for info about open relationships. The idea was already in her mind before evil TikTok sent her all those supposed brainwashing videos on open relationships. I use TikTok and I have never seen one open relationship video pop up on me. I see plenty of makeup, fitness, paranormal, metaphysical, and wedding ideas, which is because the algorithms picked up on my interests. Anyone that is that impressionable in their late 20s, that would use TikTok for their life's most important choices is someone whose maturity is quite stunted and probably should not be on the internet. I hate this, 27 degrees Fahrenheit, still suffering 2 years later. 2 years later, it's been 2 years. I've tried to stay offline and live life, but my ex and his now wife find new ways to live in my head rent-free. I wanted an open relationship, so what? You don't just string me along for 8 months, get some new girl who you met through me, and then marry her. This isn't fair. She's living in my home, with something that should be my husband, and he's been renewing the restraining order ever since it first expired, and I know he's gonna keep doing it because, for reasons beyond my knowledge, the man hates me. FML comments. Comment 1. Was he visibly happy when you wanted to open up the relationship? If he wasn't, you were making plans to date whilst he was making plans for his future and his dignity. Comment 2. Eh bien, je peux vous dire les raisons. You wanted an open relationship, he didn't. He said if you insisted, and he got feelings for someone, he would dump you. He fell in love. You got dumped. You then harassed him and his new girlfriend by showing up at their apartment to talk. You consider her yelling at you to hurry up as inciting a physical fight which ended in your being rightfully maced. You are delusional and a threat. That's why he hates you. That's why he renewed the restraining order. You need serious professional help, and you won't find it on Reddit. My boyfriend deleted my Sims saves from 2017 out of jealousy, smashed the backup USB as I begged him to stop. I broke up with him. Let's just start by saying that I, 24 male, love my girlfriend, Aaliyah, 20 female, very much. She's a super hard-working girl, and she spends a lot of her time on classes trying to get the highest grades possible for applying to nursing school in the near future. When she's not doing that, she's doing chores or cutting down on her ever-growing to-do list. And when she's not doing that, she's spending 2 hours a day playing The Sims. This is where the problem comes in. After all the stuff she does, Aaliyah doesn't have as much time to spend with me as she could. She's a perfectionist too, so when she's doing the more serious stuff like school, she puts in more effort than necessary, which is time-consuming. It really got to me that even knowing this, she'll spend so much time on The Sims. It's something frivolous she's doing when we already only get so little time together. She's also an adult, so essentially playing digital dolls almost every day is kind of something she ought to grow out of by now. I decided to step in and have her cut back on this. I obviously didn't delete the whole game, but I figured deleting the little save files she was working on would deter her from spending so much time on it. That decision backfired tremendously. When she logged onto her game, she thought there was some glitch going on and kept restarting it until I explained to her that I removed the saves. She absolutely flipped out on me, saying she'd been playing in that save file since like 2017, and I had ruined years of game progress. Sims isn't even a goal-oriented game? I told her she was overreacting because she still has the game, and she could just remake her same little characters if it mattered so much, but it doesn't need to, and maybe now she can focus on more adult interests, like loved ones. Basically, she left immediately, saying she was so stupid to leave her gaming laptop at my place, and now she won't answer my calls. I know that this is a total overreaction, but I started to feel a little bad once I realized it may not be as easy to redo her characters as I initially thought. So, ATA for deleting my girlfriend's Sim saves? TL.dr. My girlfriend is obsessed with The Sims, so to deter her from playing it so much, I deleted her save files. She blew up at me. ATA? The next day. Did you really think I wouldn't find this post? Did you really think I wouldn't see how you've been talking about me? I shudder to think what you've said and what you deleted. Why don't you tell them the real story? About how you not only deleted the save files, but also hammered the backup thumb drive so hard there's a dent on your countertop now while I cried for you to stop. Why don't you tell them about how you tag along to my SI group after bio because you don't want me to be out of your sight? Why don't you tell them about how my best friend, who's so-called in love with me, literally lives in another state and only visits once or twice a year? Why don't you tell them about how when my mother was sick a few months ago, you were blowing up my line all day, every day, for attention, knowing I was her primary caregiver 24/7? Why are you telling them you work full-time or that you manage a grocery store when you part-time manage the fast food place inside it? I want you to fucking take this to heart when I say this, but I have genuinely been so much worse off for knowing you. You've destroyed my self-esteem with your constant criticisms of what I enjoy. You've controlled me in every way for as long as I've known you. You don't understand boundaries or when no means no. Your racist fucking family treats me like dog shit, and your friends are equally racist, punk bitch assholes. You ruined something I've spent years of my life growing up with, and I could never bring myself to forgive and forget that, no matter how much love I've poured into you. I hate you for what you did to me and for what you've been doing. I mean that. I'm gonna make this so crystal clear since you didn't understand it the first time. We are through, go fuck yourself. 9 days later, that's it? Sorry for taking a while to tell everyone. I went to a local tech shop a few days ago, and they helped me to recover everything. I hadn't had the chance to update due to final season. I'm typing this on my way to class. But yes, for anyone still wondering, I got everything back. During a family vacation, my husband's family treated me coldly and isolated me. He justified their behavior as family tradition. I plastered on a smile and said, perfect. I have my own way too. The next morning, all hell broke loose. They found out what I'd done. In looking back, the signs were always there. The casual digs, the dismissive glances, the way I was always treated as an afterthought in my own marriage. But I ignored them. I loved my husband, Mark. I kept telling myself that if I just kept trying, if I was patient enough, things would change. They didn't. Instead, I ended up on this family vacation in Hilton Head, South Carolina, supposed to be fun and relaxing, but it turned into something else entirely. Something I'll never forget. We'd just arrived at the resort. Picture perfect, you know? White sand, palm trees, the sound of the waves. I was actually excited. I hoped, maybe naively, that this trip would be different. That my in-laws, Richard and Susan, would finally warm up to me. That we'd sit together, laugh, actually bond as a family. I was wrong. That first night, we went to a nice restaurant. The waiter led us to a long table set for our group. Just as I was about to sit next to Mark, Richard piped up. Oh, there must be some mistake, he said, shaking his head. She'll need her own table. I blinked, thinking I'd misheard. Excuse me? Susan didn't even look up from her menu. It's just how we do things. I looked at Mark, waiting for him to say something, to tell them how ridiculous this was. That I was his wife, not some random stranger. Instead, he just sighed and shrugged. It's just their way, he muttered. Their way. So, I sat at my own table. Alone. I should have walked out right then and there. But I didn't. I told myself it was just a weird tradition, a one-time thing. It wasn't. The next morning, I got up early to go to breakfast with my family. I headed down to the hotel restaurant, expecting to see them waiting. They weren't. I texted Mark. No response. I wandered around for nearly half an hour before finding them already sat at a large table, halfway through their meal, laughing and chatting as if nothing was wrong. As if I didn't exist? I walked up, completely puzzled. Why didn't you tell me you were coming down? Richard barely glanced up. We assumed you'd figure it out. Susan sipped her coffee. It's just how we do things. I looked at Mark. He was already eating, acting like everything was perfectly normal. That's when it hit me. I wasn't part of their family. I never had been. And Mark. He wasn't on my side. The rest of the trip followed the same depressing pattern. Every meal, I ate alone. Every group activity, they casually forgot to invite me. They went on a private boat cruise, which I learned about from their damn Instagram. They did a formal wine tasting, I only realized when I walked past them in the foyer, all dressed up and heading out the door. I asked Mark about it later. You could have texted me, I said, trying to keep my voice even. He just groaned again, as if I were the one being difficult. It's just their way. That was the only answer he ever gave me. By the fourth day, I'd had it. I stopped trying. I stopped asking. They wanted me to be invisible? Fine. But they had no idea what was coming. I had my own way too. That night, while they were out drinking and enjoying their perfect little family vacation, I went back to the hotel room and got to work. I wasn't just sitting at a separate table, I was prepared to remove myself entirely. And they were about to feel it. I pulled up my email, opened the reservation confirmations, and got to work. Because guess what? I had booked everything. The hotel bore my name. The rental car was paid for with my credit card. The dinner reservations were on my account. Susan had been looking forward to her resort spa day for weeks. Oh, yes. I'd booked that too. I canceled everything. One by one. I wiped their precious little vacation off the map. Their rooms? Canceled. Their rental car? Gone. Their fancy dinner at the seaside restaurant? Not happening. I even called the spa to politely advise them that Susan would not be attending. Then, I packed my bags, took the rental car, and left. While they were clinking glasses and toasting to their ideal family dynamic, I was already driving down the highway towards Charleston. I booked myself a luxury suite, ordered room service, and sat on the balcony overlooking the ocean, finally at peace. Meanwhile, back at Hilton Head, all hell was breaking loose. I woke up in Charleston feeling refreshed for the first time in days. The seaside wind blew through my hotel room as I sipped my coffee and sprawled out in a soft lounge chair, watching the waves roll in. Then, my phone started buzzing nonstop. Mark. I let it ring. Then Susan. Then Mark again. Then Richard. I put my phone on silent and smiled. They'd finally noticed. I plastered on a smile and said, "Perfect. I have my own way too." The next morning, all hell broke loose. They found out what I'd done. In looking back, the signs were always there. The casual digs, the dismissive glances, the way I was always treated as an afterthought in my own marriage. But I ignored them. I loved my husband, Mark. I kept telling myself that if I just kept trying, if I was patient enough, things would change. They didn't. Instead, I ended up on this family vacation in Hilton Head, South Carolina, supposed to be fun and relaxing, but it turned into something else entirely. Something I'll never forget. We'd just arrived at the resort. Picture perfect, you know? White sand, palm trees, the sound of the waves. I was actually excited. I hoped, maybe naively, that this trip would be different. That my in-laws, Richard and Susan, would finally warm up to me. That we'd sit together, laugh, actually bond as a family. I was wrong. That first night, we went to a nice restaurant. The waiter led us to a long table set for our group. Just as I was about to sit next to Mark, Richard piped up. "Oh, there must be some mistake," he said, shaking his head. "She'll need her own table." I blinked, thinking I'd misheard. "Excuse me?" Susan didn't even look up from her menu. "It's just how we do things." I looked at Mark, waiting for him to say something, to tell them how ridiculous this was. That I was his wife, not some random stranger. Instead, he just sighed and shrugged. "It's just their way," he muttered. Their way. So, I sat at my own table. Alone. I should have walked out right then and there. But I didn't. I told myself it was just a weird tradition, a one-time thing. It wasn't. The next morning, I got up early to go to breakfast with my family. I headed down to the hotel restaurant, expecting to see them waiting. They weren't. I texted Mark. No response. I wandered around for nearly half an hour before finding them already sat at a large table, halfway through their meal, laughing and chatting as if nothing was wrong. As if I didn't exist? I walked up, completely puzzled. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming down?" Richard barely glanced up. "We assumed you'd figure it out." Susan sipped her coffee. "It's just how we do things." I looked at Mark. He was already eating, acting like everything was perfectly normal. That's when it hit me. I wasn't part of their family. I never had been. And Mark. He wasn't on my side. The rest of the trip followed the same depressing pattern. Every meal, I ate alone. Every group activity, they casually forgot to invite me. They went on a private boat cruise, which I learned about from their damn Instagram. They did a formal wine tasting. I only realized when I walked past them in the foyer, all dressed up and heading out the door. I asked Mark about it later. "You could have texted me," I said, trying to keep my voice even. He just groaned again, as if I were the one being difficult. "It's just their way." That was the only answer he ever gave me. By the fourth day, I'd had it. I stopped trying. I stopped asking. They wanted me to be invisible? Fine. But they had no idea what was coming. I had my own way too. That night, while they were out drinking and enjoying their perfect little family vacation, I went back to the hotel room and got to work. I wasn't just sitting at a separate table, I was prepared to remove myself entirely. And they were about to feel it. I pulled up my email, opened the reservation confirmations, and got to work. Because guess what? I had booked everything. The hotel bore my name. The rental car was paid for with my credit card. The dinner reservations were on my account. Susan had been looking forward to her resort spa day for weeks. Oh, yes. I'd booked that too. I canceled everything. One by one. I wiped their precious little vacation off the map. Their rooms? Canceled. Their rental car? Gone. Their fancy dinner at the seaside restaurant? Not happening. I even called the spa to politely advise them that Susan would not be attending. Then, I packed my bags, took the rental car, and left. While they were clinking glasses and toasting to their ideal family dynamic, I was already driving down the highway towards Charleston. I booked myself a luxury suite, ordered room service, and sat on the balcony overlooking the ocean, finally at peace. Meanwhile, back at Hilton Head, all hell was breaking loose. I woke up in Charleston feeling refreshed for the first time in days. The seaside wind blew through my hotel room as I sipped my coffee and sprawled out in a soft lounge chair, watching the waves roll in. Then, my phone started buzzing nonstop. Mark. I let it ring. Then Susan. Then Mark again. Then Richard. I put my phone on silent and smiled. They'd finally noticed. I stared out at the ocean, at the waves crashing gently against the shore. No, I said, my voice firm. I think I've already fixed it. And I hung up. After I hung up on Mark, I sat there staring at my phone, my mind racing. Mark had known. He'd seen all of this before, and he still let me walk right into it. I wasn't just furious anymore, I was done. I poured myself another drink, leaned back in my lounge chair, and tried to enjoy the rest of the evening. But something kept nagging at me. If he'd lied about his ex-wife, what else had he lied about? I decided to do some digging. I opened Facebook and searched for her name, Rachel, Mark's ex-wife. I had never thought to look her up before, but now I needed answers. Her profile was private, but I scrolled through her mutual friends, searching for anyone who might be willing to talk. That's when I spotted her sister's profile, Lauren. And she had public posts. I clicked on one from 2 years ago, shortly after Rachel and Mark had split. Never let a man's family destroy you. Never let them convince you that you're less than you are. My sister deserved better. We all tried to warn her, never again. My stomach lurched. I scrolled further and found an old comment from Sarah, Mark's cousin, the same one who had messaged me. I wish she'd listen to us. At least she's free now. Listen to them. I sat there, my heart pounding. I didn't know what to do. I could message Lauren. I could ask her what really happened, but was I ready to hear it? I stared at the screen for a long time. Then finally, I took a deep breath and typed. Hey, this is going to sound really random, but I think we need to talk. She replied within minutes. Lauren didn't waste time. Lauren. I was wondering when you'd reach out. That one message hit me like a punch to the gut. Me. You know who I am? Lauren. Yeah. We've been waiting for this to happen. I stared at the screen, my fingers frozen over the keyboard. Me? We? What do you mean? Lauren. Rachel wasn't the first, you know, and she certainly wasn't the last. My breath hitched. Me? What are you saying? Lauren. I'm saying Mark has done this before, more than once. His parents have done this before, more than once. And if you're talking to me right now, I'm guessing you just went through it too. I felt sick. This wasn't just some isolated incident. This was a game to them. A twisted little tradition they played with every woman Mark brought into his life. They never saw his partners as real family, just obstacles to be overcome. And Mark? He let it happen. Every single time. Me? Why didn't anyone tell me? Lauren? We tried. But Mark always makes sure his girlfriends stay isolated. He tells them his family just has quirks or traditions. He makes sure they don't ask too many questions. Did he ever tell you Rachel was the problem? I closed my eyes. He had. He'd painted Rachel as difficult, as someone who never understood his family, who always made drama over small things. But now I knew the truth. Rachel hadn't been dramatic. She'd been trapped. And now so was I. Or at least, I had been until now. I didn't sleep that night. The realization that I had wasted years of my life on this man burned in my chest. But there was something else, too. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Why had Mark called me so many times today? Why was he this desperate? Then, at 6 a.m., I got my answer. A text popped up from an unknown number. Ma'am, this is Officer Daniels with the Hilton Head Police Department. We need to speak with you regarding a missing persons report filed by your husband. I sat up so fast I nearly knocked my phone across the room. A missing persons report? I scrambled to call back, my mind racing. The second the officer answered, I blurted out, I'm fine, I'm not missing. A pause. Then, ma'am, are you saying you left voluntarily? Yes, obviously, I left voluntarily. My husband knows exactly where I am, he's been calling me nonstop. The officer sighed. Your husband reported that you left without explanation and haven't been answering his calls. He said he was concerned for your safety. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached. This wasn't concern. This was control. Mark hadn't been worried about me, he had been trying to force me to come back. I took a deep breath. Officer, I am perfectly fine. I am in Charleston. I left Hilton Head by choice. I am not missing, and I do not want my husband contacting me. A pause. Would you like to file a formal request for no further contact? I hesitated, then finally exhaled. Yes, I would. And just like that, I drove the first legal nail into the coffin of my marriage. Less than an hour later, my phone buzzed with a new text. This time it was from Susan. Susan? I cannot believe you would humiliate us like this. I laughed out loud. I ignored it. Then, another message. Susan. You made Mark involve the police. Do you have any idea how this looks? Oh, I made Mark involve the police? I rolled my eyes and took another sip of my coffee. Then, the messages kept coming. Susan. This family has done nothing but try to welcome you. Susan. You're being incredibly selfish. Susan. You need to come back and fix this. And finally, Susan. If you don't come back, Mark is going to make things very difficult for you. I froze. This wasn't even subtle. It was a threat. I sat back in my chair, rereading the message over and over. I had thought this was just about control, just about their twisted little family games. But now I realized something much worse. They weren't just trying to humiliate me, they were trying to break me. And if I didn't do something fast, Mark was about to make sure they succeeded. I stared at Susan's text for a long time. If you don't come back, Mark is going to make things very difficult for you. It wasn't just a warning, it was a promise. I could feel it now, the shift. This wasn't just them being cold or dismissive, this was a battle, and I was supposed to roll over and lose, but I wouldn't, not this time. I cracked my knuckles, took a deep breath, and sent one single message back. Me. Perfect. Let's make things difficult then. Then, I booked a hotel conference room in Charleston and invited everyone. Mark, his parents, and Sarah. Because if they wanted a war, I was going to bring it right to their doorstep. The next morning, I sat in the conference room, waiting. The long wooden table was set with nothing but bottled water and the thick silence of anticipation. I didn't have to wait long. The door slammed open. Mark stormed in first, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might shatter. His parents followed, Susan's heels clicking sharply against the floor, Richard's face already flushed with anger. Sarah came in last, hesitant, her arms crossed. She gave me a slight nod. I had no idea if she was there as a witness, a mediator, or just for the front row seats to the coming implosion. I leaned back in my chair. Glad you could all make it. Mark's voice was tight. What the hell is this? I smiled, slow and deliberate. A conversation. You've been so eager to talk, so let's talk. Richard scoffed, arms crossed over his chest. You think this is funny? No. I said quietly. I think it's pathetic. I think you people play sick little games with the women in your family, and you finally picked the wrong one. Susan's eyes narrowed. You abandoned us? I laughed. I actually laughed. Oh, did I abandon you? That's rich, coming from the people who spent an entire vacation pretending I didn't exist. Mark sighed heavily, gripping the back of a chair. You're blowing this out of proportion. That was it. That was the moment. I slammed my hands down on the table so hard that Susan visibly flinched. I am your wife, my voice resonated in the room, cold and clear. Not a stranger. Not some random outsider. I am your wife, and you let them treat me like nothing. And you, I stabbed a finger at Mark. Knew this wasn't the first time. You knew exactly what was happening, and you let it happen anyway. His face lost all color. Susan cut in quickly, her voice sharp. We were just following tradition, I shot back. It's not tradition, it's control. It's a test, and you fail every woman who walks into this family. Mark shook his head. You're overreacting. I grabbed my phone, pulled up the text from Lauren, and threw it onto the table in front of him. Read it. He hesitated. Read it slowly. Mark reluctantly picked up the phone and scrolled. I watched his face tighten with every word. Then he threw the phone down as if it had burned him. This isn't proof of anything. Richard crossed his arms. You're dredging up old stories. It has nothing to do with us. I turned to Susan. Is that right? Because last night you sent me a message threatening me. You told me if I didn't come back, Mark would make things difficult. Her mouth snapped shut. Sarah let out a low whistle. Damn. Mark whipped his head towards his mother, his eyes hardening. What did you do? Susan stiffened. I was trying to make her understand. Understand what? Mark's voice rose. That you've been playing this game for years? That you did the same thing to Rachel? Richard shifted uncomfortably. Susan shot him a desperate look, but the damage was done. Mark's jaw ticked. Jesus Christ. And just like that, I saw it. The crack. The tiniest fracture in his carefully constructed loyalty to his parents. The moment he realized I hadn't been wrong. That I had never been wrong. Mark turned back to me. For the first time, he actually looked unsure. I stared at him, waiting to see if he would finally say something that mattered. But then he ran a hand through his hair. I can fix this. My stomach dropped. That was his first instinct. Not an apology, not regret, not a goddamn ounce of empathy. Just fixing the optics. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. You really don't get it, do you? Silence. I stood up, adjusting my bag. I'm not coming back, Mark. That jolted him into action. Wait, what? I'm done. His eyes widened. Sarah snorted derisively. Dude, how have you not figured that out by now? Susan's voice turned shrill. This is ridiculous. You're throwing away your marriage over a misunderstanding. I shook my head. No, Susan. You threw it away. You and Richard, with your sick, twisted way of treating people. Mark was just too weak to stop it. Mark reached for my arm, but I stepped back, out of his reach. Wait, let's talk about this. I held up my hand, stopping him. No, Mark. You talk, you make excuses, you let them control you, but I'm done listening. I grabbed my phone and walked to the door. Mark's voice was almost desperate now. Wait. Where are you going? I turned back, staring at him one last time. I'm leaving. Susan scoffed. You can't just leave a marriage. I met her gaze, my expression utterly blank. Watch me. Then, I walked out the door. It took 6 months to finalize the divorce. Mark tried everything, begging, pleading, blaming, even accusing me of overreacting. But I never looked back. Sarah stayed in touch. She told me things imploded after I left. Apparently, Mark finally confronted his parents, and it wasn't pretty. Richard called him weak. Susan cried, saying I had brainwashed him. For the first time, Mark saw them for who they truly were. It didn't change anything for me. I was already gone. I moved back to Charleston permanently. I found a new apartment, reconnected with old friends, and started rebuilding my life. One night, months later, I got a text from an unknown number. Mark. I see it now. I'm sorry. I stared at it for a long time. Then, with a deep breath that felt like releasing years of pent-up tension, I deleted it. Because, for the first time in what felt like forever, I was free. My wife declared, "Plenty of men want me," so I walked away, giving her the freedom to pursue what she believed was better for her. In the midst of an argument, my wife stated, "Plenty of men want me." So I left her to those men to handle. I never expected it to go down like this. It all started with a dumb quarrel, one of those minor, daily things that you forget about later but seem like the world is ending when they happen. She'd been onto me about something small, as usual, something about not putting out the garbage on time or perhaps not answering her phone soon enough when she was out with her pals. It was no big thing. Except she'd been carrying a lot of frustration lately, and I was the only one around to vent it on. That is when she said it. Plenty of men would want me. She spat the words out, her eyes narrowing as she looked at me, challenging me to respond. The words hung there, weighty and piercing, more cutting than anything she'd spoken previously. We'd been through tough times before, certainly, but nothing had ever made me feel quite this way. It wasn't the first time we'd battled about something minor, but this seemed different. I wasn't prepared for the rage that erupted in my chest. Perhaps it was because, in the midst of the dispute, I understood she meant it. She wasn't just saying things to hurt me, there was truth behind them. A fact I could no longer ignore. The truth ached. She was not the same lady I had married. I don't care about those men, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. But it broke. I wasn't sure if I was angry or embarrassed about how I handled it. I was tired, mentally fatigued from attempting to cling onto something that seemed to be slipping away. But I wasn't sure how to stop it. The tension in the room grew. My heart began hammering in my chest, like if it were trying to escape. I could feel my pulse in my throat, fingers, and all over my body. I wasn't sure how to calm down. I didn't know how to convince her that I was doing my best. I was trying to be there for her. But nothing was ever sufficient. She did not back down either. In fact, she appeared almost pleased, as if she had won something I hadn't realized I was playing for. "Oh, I know you don't care. But you should. Maybe you'd actually start doing something right for once if you did," she told me. Her comments were chilly, yet with a hint of something deeper behind them. Something I couldn't quite identify. Resentment? Regret? A sense of accomplishment, as if she had finally found the way to break me. I wanted to say something, but my throat tightened suddenly. I wasn't sure if I was trying to save the person I believed I was fighting for or the notion of her. The one I'd been clinging onto for years. The person I thought I knew. She looked away, arms folded, her countenance unreadable. I could feel the distance between us increasing. Not simply in the gap between our bodies, but also in the way she began to stare at me. Her eyes did not soften when they met mine. Like I was no longer the person she cared about. I wanted to shout. To proclaim that I did not deserve this. That I'd been nothing but patient. Nothing except the present. Nothing but here for her. And she didn't notice it. But what good would it do? She was already checked out. I could see it in the way she carried herself, the way she avoided eye contact. It seemed as if she'd already decided. I felt little. Perhaps she was right. Maybe there were plenty more men out there who wanted her and could provide what I couldn't. But I was not going to be the one begging for morsels of affection. So I left. It was not dramatic. There were no slam doors, yelling battles, or emotional goodbyes. I did not even pack a bag. I grabbed my jacket, slung it over my shoulders, and stepped out the door. Perhaps I should have felt more, angry, sad, or confused. But all I felt was this strange, numb sensation of clarity. This was not working. She was not working. I wasn't working for her anymore. I wasn't sure where I was headed. I just couldn't stay there. Not now. Not after what she had said. It isn't like I hadn't considered leaving before. But this time, it felt different. This time, there was no going back. I didn't visit a friend's residence. I didn't call anyone to inform them what occurred. I simply drove. The kilometers passing felt like the world was dragging me away from everything. Away from the mess I'd gotten myself into. The silence in the automobile was like a shield. The only sounds were the hum of the tires on the road and the rhythm of my pulse. I ended up at a bar. Alone. It wasn't a classy establishment, but rather a rundown dive with the odor of old beer and fried food. But I didn't care. I ordered a drink, leaned against the counter, and felt the wine burn down my throat, as if it was washing everything away. It was the first time in months that I felt something, anything. The bartender gave me a knowing look. But I didn't care. I did not want anyone to know. I did not wish to explain. Then the door opened. Someone walked in. They grabbed my eye, just a fleeting glance, but I noticed how they stared at me. Not like a broken man. Not like someone who has recently left his wife, but maybe someone they could chat to? Perhaps there is someone they can be around. I did not know. And I didn't care. I knew they didn't see me in the same way she did, and for once, it seemed like it was all I needed. But I was not prepared to make any judgments. Not yet. The night was still early. I just kept drinking, letting the hours pass, feeling a strange sense of liberation develop within me. And then, I heard her name. A voice sounded from behind me. She said she'd leave you? I glanced around expecting to see someone I know. But the man speaking was unfamiliar. Nonetheless, his comments wounded deeply. What the hell? I turned slowly, trying to figure out why this stranger's comments felt like a punch in the gut. He was seated a few stools down, nursing his own drink, his gaze occasionally traveling to mine as he spoke. She said she'd leave you, he continued, more casually this time, as if we were already having the conversation. My heart stutters. My mind raced to catch up and grasp what this guy was expressing. Was he speaking about my wife? How in the hell did he know? Had she told anyone? Had she been informing others? I wasn't sure what to say. I just gazed at him, trying to decide if I should stand up and leave or ask him to elaborate. Who the hell are you? I finally managed to speak, though the words came out colder than I wanted. I was not searching for a confrontation, but I couldn't control myself. This guy knew something, and it made my stomach turn. He smirked, as if he had been waiting for this moment. But instead of providing an explanation, he simply shrugged, as if the solution were obvious. She didn't think you'd leave, he explained. Thought you'd just hang around, put up with whatever she threw at you. My mind was whirling. He had the audacity to talk about my life as if he knew everything. What did he know? What had she told him? I grasped the edge of the bar to keep myself stable. But there was an uncomfortable sensation crawling up my spine. "Why are you telling me this?" I inquired, my voice a little more calm now, but the anxiety was setting in. My fingers remained tight over my glass, as if it were necessary to keep me grounded. He took a slow sip from his drink and continued to act as if we were having a normal chat. As if he were some sort of confidant. Or something else. He did not appear to be uncomfortable. "She came in here a few weeks ago," stated the worker. "With someone else." I froze. My mind immediately flashed back to every time I had doubted her faithfulness. Every tiny adjustment in her behavior. Every unusual excuse. "What do you mean, with someone else?" I inquired, already anticipating the response. The man's eyes shifted to me, this time sharper. As if he knew he had my entire attention. "I mean, she came in here with another guy. They were really cozy. She didn't even notice me watching. Guess she thought I was just another regular at the bar." I felt nauseous. I'd never had any tangible evidence of her unfaithfulness before. But hearing that from a stranger, someone who appeared so certain, felt like a brick slamming into my chest. I wanted to yell. At him. To demand information. To get him to return it. But I could not find the words. Instead, I found myself leaning forward, my elbows on the bar, as if being closer would make everything seem less real. "You're sure?" My voice was lower and almost pleading. I hated myself for asking, but I couldn't resist. I needed to know. The man leaned back and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Oh yeah." She was laughing, touching his arm, getting pretty close. She didn't even care who saw. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears, loud and quick. My entire body was on fire. But I didn't feel angry. It was a deep, gnawing ache, as if someone had chiseled out a portion of me that I had no idea existed. I wasn't sure what was worse. The possibility that she had been with someone else. Alternatively, she had not given it a second consideration. "I don't think she cares much about you anymore," the man said nonchalantly, as if he were merely giving general advice. He gave me a look that made me feel vulnerable, as if he knew something I didn't want to disclose. I wasn't sure what to say. I could feel myself beginning to unravel. Piece by piece. Everything she had stated? The things I had disregarded or attributed to stress or something else. Was it all leading up to this? Was this the moment when everything I thought I knew about my life, my relationship, fell apart? I gazed at the man, hoping for a response, some kind of closure. But he wasn't offering anything else. He drank his drink, looked aside, and signaled for another. As if this wasn't a significant issue to him. I wanted to shout. But I did not. I left. I scarcely noticed the stroll to my car. The frigid air pierced through me. The engine hums as it starts up. It seemed like everything had changed in an instant. Like the world was no longer a place where I could simply glide along thinking everything was all right. As I traveled into the night, my mind was racing with ideas and possibilities. I wasn't sure where I was headed anymore. I wasn't sure if I was escaping from her, or simply attempting to escape the sense of betrayal that had settled into my bones. I eventually pulled into a parking lot. One I did not recognize. The silence of the night surrounded me. The only sound was the gentle hum of the car's engine. I looked out the window, attempting to make sense of what had just occurred. But something else was nagging at me now. Something I didn't consider in the excitement of the moment. What if I wasn't the only person who had left? What if she were waiting for me to leave, so she could finally make her own decisions? I wasn't certain I wanted to find out. But I knew I needed to. I spent the next 3 days in a blur, mostly driving around, trying to clear my mind. But the ideas did not stop. Every street reminded me of her. Of everything we had built. And everything was crumbling apart. My phone rang several times, but I didn't have the energy to respond. I did not want to hear from her. Not yet. Not while everything seemed so raw. Then came the message. A basic text. Nevertheless, it felt like a bomb exploded in my lap. "We need to talk." I looked at the text on the screen. My hand shook slightly as I read them repeatedly. I wasn't sure what she would say. But I could feel the tempest brewing inside me again. I did not want to chat. Not yet. Not while things remained so ambiguous. But I could not ignore it. I needed to know where we stood. I responded simply. "I will be there." When I arrived at the residence, it was really silent. The front door was slightly ajar. The silence inside felt almost ominous. It was too vacant. Too still. She sat at the kitchen table with her hands folded together. She seemed smaller than I remembered. When she saw me, her eyes were a jumble of things. Guilt, perhaps. Or fear. I could not tell. There was also something else there. Something I couldn't quite identify. She didn't look at me the same way she had previously. Not the way I was used to seeing her. Her glance was not warm, no connection. I didn't know where else to start, she explained, breaking the stillness. Her voice was soft yet steady. I owe you an explanation. I swallowed the lump in my throat. It felt thick. You owe me more than that. The words came out sharper than I intended. But I didn't care. I needed answers. I wanted something to make sense of this chaos. She did not respond to the severity of my tone. Instead, she groaned and looked down at her hands. I never meant for things to get this bad. But things weren't right, were they? I didn't know how to fix it, and maybe I wasn't even trying anymore. I simply stared at her, my thoughts reeling. She was not even trying. That is what it boiled down to. I had overlooked all those subtle signs. All those occasions when I should have asked inquiries. I'd been too busy pretending that everything could be mended. That we could return to the way things used to be. She took a deep breath. For a brief moment, I thought she may cry. However, she didn't. Instead, she proceeded. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought if I pushed you far enough, you'd be the one to walk away. It would have been easier that way, right? But you didn't. You stuck around. And I kept pushing. And then, when I met someone else? She paused. I don't know. It felt like I was already done before it even started. My brain was spinning. Someone else. The word struck me harder than expected. It wasn't only the argument. Or her snarky remarks. It wasn't only that she appeared distant and frigid. She'd actually been with someone. What the hell are you talking about? I eventually choked out. My hands were clenched, but I was scarcely conscious of them. You think you can just go out and do whatever you want and I wouldn't notice? I didn't believe I was living in a fiction. But perhaps I was? Perhaps she was. She looked up at me, her eyes full of something, regret. I never wanted to hurt you, but I wasn't happy. I couldn't tell you that. I didn't know how. The silence stretched between us. A chasm that seemed impossible to cross. All these years. All of the moments we had shared. So here we were. Sitting in the kitchen. Strangers. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. So what now? You just expect me to walk back into this like nothing happened? I shook my head, my frustration finally spilling out. You think I just forget? That I let you shut me out like that and then come back? I'm sorry, she whispered. Her face wrinkled, but she did not respond. Instead, she looked away, as if she couldn't take the weight of my words. I stepped back and ran my hand through my hair. Attempting to think. Attempting to breathe. You were right about one thing, I told you. My voice was shaking now, even though I fought to keep it steady. I did leave. You wanted me to go? And I did. But not for the reasons you think. She blinked, a scowl forming on her forehead. What do you mean? I felt a rush of bitter laughter rise in my chest. But I did not let it out. Not yet. I left because I finally saw it. I saw that you don't see me anymore. I'm just someone you're stuck with. Someone who will always be here, no matter how much you push. You made me feel small. And then you decided it wasn't enough. So you found someone else. Her voice was scarcely audible now. It wasn't like that. It was a mistake. An error. I scoffed as the ache in my chest made it difficult to breathe. You don't just make a mistake like that. You make choices. You make decisions. And you chose him. The hush that followed was smothering. Neither of us knew what to say next, because the truth came out. It was in the air, heavy and obvious. She'd betrayed me. And I had to make a decision. Can I live with that? Could I even attempt to restore what we had? Or was it simply too far gone? I turned towards the door. My body felt weary. My heart was broken. But something inside me stood taller than it has in months. I can't do this anymore, I murmured quietly. I'm done. I walked out the door without saying another word. I did not glance back. And as I drove away, the weight on my chest gradually lifted, little by little. The route ahead was unclear. It was not easy. For the first time in a long while, I was making my own decision. And maybe, that was all I needed to do. I spent 2 years in prison for my sister, but upon release, my family coldly rejected me, treating me as worthless. Get out! Get out! Get out! Seamus was furious, grabbing my collar and attempting to haul me outside. Don't touch me. I forcefully shrugged off his grasp, forcing him to stumble and almost collapse. Smack! Melanie walked forward without saying anything and slapped me hard across the face. Jonathan, you're no longer the lobby manager making tens of thousands of dollars a month. You are no longer a valuable individual. Did you really expect us to put up with you? She yelled down the hallway. Security! Where is security? When the security guards heard this, they raced over. Melanie pointed at me and yelled at the security officers, "How can you allow anyone in here? Get this beggar out of here now." The chief of security approached Melanie and kindly said, "Ma'am, what is the problem?" Melanie pointed at me again. "This man is a penniless beggar attempting to scam a meal here. Get him out." The security chief stared at me coldly and said, "Sir, please leave." I normally kept a quiet profile, rarely revealing my role as hotel owner. Even though I lived and ate here, only high management knew who I was. When I saw the head of security trying to toss me out so rapidly, I fixed him with a harsh look and asked, "Is this how you handle situations? Don't you understand the hotel's policies? We should not judge anyone based on their appearance or offend any guest." The security chief's eyes flickered with apprehension. He gazed at me uncomfortably, not daring to say anything. When Seamus saw this, he grew anxious. "Don't let him trick you. He's simply a broke ex-con. Throw him out." "Sorry, sir. We don't eject any guests without a reason." The security chief strongly declined Seamus' request. "This is ridiculous. So, what are you security men doing? Are you terrified of him after only a few words?" Gavin shouted at the guards before returning his gaze to me. "Jonathan, I don't believe you can bluff your way out of this. I know the hotel management. One call from me and you're out." With that, he took out his phone and called. "Mr. Feldman, it's Gavin, I'm busy." The call ended abruptly with a frigid response, leaving Gavin standing awkwardly holding his phone. I scoffed and calmly asked, "You want to talk with Mr. Feldman? Allow me to help you." I got out my phone and dialed Mr. Feldman. "Come to private room 777 within 3 minutes. "Are you out of your mind, Jonathan? You are a broke ex-con. Do not claim to be someone important here. We know what kind of person you are. Is there any reason to put on this act?" Gavin scoffed at me. The other relatives looked at me like I was a clown, with derision and disgust on their faces. Melanie wiped the sweat from her brow and whispered, embarrassed, "This is so humiliating. How did I raise my son like this?" James also appeared frustrated. "Jonathan, please leave. Stop pretending. You are making a fool of yourself and your family." "Exactly. Some poor folks have lost their minds and created delusions." Gavin scoffed. "He couldn't even get Mr. Feldman here. Do you think you can?" "That's ridiculous," Seamus hissed, his tone full of scorn. He glanced at me as if simply acknowledging my presence was beneath him. But, just as he finished speaking, a middle-aged woman in a suit appeared by our side. I took the fall for my sister and served 2 years in prison. But when I got out, my sister and brother-in-law were concerned that I would compete for the property and assist my parents in attempting to push me out of the house. 2 years ago, Joanna and Seamus were speeding and traveling in the wrong direction with my car when they collided and murdered someone. My folks approached me quickly. They claimed Joanna had a weak heart but had ultimately managed to marry. If she went to prison, not only would she lose her marriage, but her life may be jeopardized. They cried and asked me to accept the blame for her. They assured me that the entire family would handsomely reward me once I was out. I didn't do it for a reward. I did it because I loved my parents and genuinely cared for my sister. I made personal sacrifices for her, including going to prison, selling my car, depleting my money, losing my job, paying the compensation, and enduring all of the insults. But I never anticipated my heartfelt sacrifice to be met with such treachery and scorn. I do not comprehend. Isn't blood meant to be thicker than water? Why does family loyalty wane in the face of personal gain? Joanna's expression darkened with disdain when she heard my words. She responded, "I've already thanked you for taking the fall. What else do you want from me? This house is now in my name, and Seamus and I are expecting a kid in a few months. There isn't enough room. You have to relocate. We cannot afford to maintain an idler." In her opinion, 2 years in prison was barely worth one thank you. Asking for more made me appear unreasonable. Melanie interjected, "Nino, don't you understand? A man's fate is to marry and provide for his family rather than to rely on them. We hope to marry you off to a respectable woman and get some security. However, as an ex-convict, no one will want you. Letting you stay here is already something we're thinking about for nostalgic reasons." Seamus said, "Exactly. You've been in prison, so you'll remain impoverished indefinitely. If we let you stay, you'll drain us dry. he warned, his tone harsh. James extinguished his cigarette and replied coldly, "Jonathan, you've grown up now. It's time you recognize the value of giving to the family rather than making problems." Each of their words was like a sharp razor cutting my heart. Despite my intense disappointment, my eyes welled up. I stared at them and exclaimed, hoarsely, "No wonder you never paid me a visit during my 2 years in prison. I assumed you were just too busy to see me. But now I realize, you only regarded me as a moneymaker. You kicked me out without hesitation when I couldn't make money anymore." I cocked my head back, trying to keep back tears. Then I inquired, "So you're all determined to kick me out today?" "Yes," Seamus responded without hesitation. Melanie, Joanna, and James all appeared determined. Obviously, there was no space for negotiating. I saw no affection in their eyes. I nodded, my heart devastated. "Fine. As you wish. We're done starting today. And I hope you don't regret it." Finally, I saw them for what they were. These folks, who I longed for during my 2 years in prison, did not deserve my sacrifices. However, the $100 million I had intended to split with them would now remain with me. I walked out the door without saying anything else and did not glance back. Behind the door, I heard Seamus' furious roar. "You think too highly of yourself. What's there to lose by cutting connections with a broke ex-convict like you? If we let you stay here and mooch off us, we'll truly regret it." After leaving that callous home, I explored the streets alone for quite some time before finding a hotel to stay at. Lying on the bed, I gazed at the 9-figure number in my bank account, lost in thought. I used to believe I grew up in a pretty happy family. When I was having challenges at work, my father patiently comforted and guided me. When I worked late at the office, my mother would bring me my favorite supper. When it rained, my sister would come and pick me up at work. I felt like the family's most cherished young prince. I was always perplexed when I saw tales online about parents preferring daughters over sons. How can such families exist? How could they not love their sons? But now I understand that dreadful sensation of helplessness and disappointment. I realized I had always been a member of such a family. All of the love I'd felt was predicated on my usefulness to them. I was more of an investment. Their love was the price, and my money was the reward. As a result, the gifts of fate had always come at a hidden cost. They smiled warmly when I told them I could generate money while also providing a nice living for everyone. But now they saw me as an ex-convict who couldn't find work and had no money or value. Their love had evaporated entirely. Little did they know, this ex-con had $100 million in his account. I couldn't help but be a little excited, wondering how they'd react if the son they loathed the most reached the pinnacle of success one day. The next day, I checked into a hotel in the city center. This wasn't just any hotel, it was a high-end, vast operation that offered dining, housing, banquets, and even business services. It had 8 levels and occupied the entire building. The location, surroundings, and foot traffic were all great. Before going to prison, I worked as a hotel lobby manager. Naturally, I wanted to return to my previous profession. Only this time, instead of being a manager, I'm the owner. I spent several hours negotiating with the hotel's owner before buying it from her. That same day, I assumed management responsibility. From then on, I lived and ate at the hotel, utilizing every opportunity to study and build new management and operational tactics. Under my direction, the hotel's business grew to the point that reservations were nearly impossible to come by. I quickly became a legitimately affluent man in the city. 6 months later, while inspecting the dining department, I overheard Joanna talking in a secluded area. "This motel is quite popular. I had to plan my daughter's 1-month birthday party 2 months in advance simply to get a table. I've heard that only the creme de la creme may dine here. Joanna, you made it, bringing us to such a luxurious location." I stopped in place when I discovered Joanna had invited our parents and a large group of relatives to this private room to celebrate her newborn daughter's 1-month birthday. Melanie was showing off by filming videos on her phone. My face appeared in the shot as her camera panned to the door. "Jonathan! What are you doing here?" Melanie set down her phone and frowned at me. When they heard this, everyone in the room turned to face me, who was standing in the doorway. "Jonathan, do you have no shame? You knew we were hosting a banquet here today and followed us only to get some food." Seamus raced up and chastised me like I was the plague. "Who said I was here to scrounge for food?" I responded calmly. "What are you here for, if not to beg? This is a high-end establishment exclusively for the privileged. If you're hungry, search through the rubbish outside." "That's where you belong," she snarled, crossing her arms and staring at me with disgust. The other family frowned and glared at me, disgusted, as if I were an unpleasant fly. Joanna also spoke up, apparently unhappy. Jonathan, when you stated you wanted to cut connections with us, I believed you had some fortitude. But now you've resorted to following us for a free supper. It's just horrible. Before I could react, James joined in. Jonathan, I educated you at a young age to be self-sufficient and dignified. Have you forgotten? How could you give up your pride for a meal? I stared at them and scoffed. It's only a meal. It does not matter to me. You are really something, aren't you? Sour grapes. As if an impoverished ex-con like you could ever afford a lunch here. Even if you've worked your entire life, Seamus sneered. Abandoned by my fiancé. After 7 years together, I tried to move on, only to discover that he was dating a younger version of me. Hello everyone, I know it's hard to believe given how nauseatingly terrible I sound right now. But before this happened, I felt really confident and pleased. Almost all of my current friends are shared friends with my ex-fiancé, so I don't want to drag them into this drama or force anyone to take sides or feel uncomfortable. So I think I'm looking to this community for comfort and wisdom because I've read so much mature and grounded advice here. I hope this makes sense, as I'm now confined in a conference room with the shades closed so no one can watch me cry while I type this. I had been with my ex-fiancé for 7 years. He is the only romantic partner I've ever really loved. I was completely in love with him. Even after all of this, I still feel that way about him. He is pleasant, hilarious, friendly, quick-witted, intriguing, ambitious, and beautiful. We were engaged 2 years ago but weren't in a hurry to marry. About a year ago, we began seriously considering having a baby. We had lived blissfully together for 6 years. We'd done all of the traveling and partying we wanted in our 20s, and we were ready to start a family. Over the next 6 months, he was far busier than usual, but I didn't think anything was wrong. I did my best to relieve any additional tension he was suffering, despite the fact that I was myself under extra pressure at work. I took up all of the housekeeping and errands, helped him arrange and pack for vacations, and simply tried to be tolerant when he worked late or had to travel for a week or two. We didn't spend as much time together during that period, and I missed him terribly, but I assumed we were still happy. When the 6 months were up, our schedules returned to normal. I was relieved, until I noticed him becoming increasingly aloof. Despite the fact that we finally had more time together, he began using his phone more frequently and appeared to be more protective of it. I'm not usually jealous, and I entirely trusted him, so I didn't think much of it. Then, after another month had passed, I brought up the possibility of trying for a baby. As we talked about it, I knew something was amiss. He remained quiet for a while. Then he unleashed a flood. He stated that he was unhappy with our relationship and had been for some time. He said he cared dearly for me, but the spark in our relationship had faded. He had tried to convince himself that he could live without that spark, but he had eventually realized that he couldn't. He told me I had done nothing wrong and was, in fact, the ideal partner, but he couldn't get rid of the nagging feeling that I wasn't the right one for him. He claimed he didn't want to hurt me, but he couldn't subject himself to a lifetime of settling for someone who wasn't his dream girl, even though he had no idea if his dream lady existed. He apologized, but he couldn't live a lie anymore. I don't think I said anything when he was telling me this since I was so stunned and surprised. I just stood there, watching and listening, crying quietly. When he finished, all I could say was, "Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Do you still love me?" He pondered for a moment before admitting that he still loved me but was no longer in love with me. We spent the entire night talking about his thoughts and our relationship until we were both weary and unable to cry. As the sun rose, he apologized again and suggested that he remain at a friend's apartment. So he packed some things and left. That was roughly 5 months ago. We never truly spoke in person again. His brother and best friend came over that weekend to get the rest of his belongings. I fled while they were packing because I couldn't tolerate being there. I was so surprised, numb, traumatized, and exhausted that I didn't cry much. I couldn't quite understand what was going on while I went through the processes of moving out and explaining the issue to my family. When I eventually got to my new house and sat alone with my boxes, I completely broke down. I couldn't stop crying and dry heaving. I ended up utilizing 5 vacation days to take a week off from work, which irritated my boss. I was unable to get out of bed. I scarcely ate, surviving on an old tub of peanut butter. I searched through all of our previous photos and attempted to figure out where everything went wrong. Then, for 4 months, I did my best to move on. I deactivated all of my social media apps so that I would not have to see him. I dove right into work. I increased my hobbies. I exercised to keep my mind busy. I met with friends and family and pretended everything was fine. I started seeing my therapist again, which helped a little. I finally thought I saw light at the end of the tunnel. Then, about a month ago, I ran into an old college pal. She claimed it was quite upsetting to realize that we weren't together anymore and astonished to see how quickly he'd moved on. I told her I wasn't keeping up with him anymore, but I was doing fine. When I came home, despite knowing it was a bad idea, I reinstalled Instagram and went to his profile. His most recent photo was taken during his cousin's wedding, with his arm around a beautiful female. All of the old photos of him and me were removed from his profile. Again, I realized it was a bad, self-destructive notion, but I looked up the girl's profile and Googled her. She is actually a younger, smarter, prettier, and better version of me. We attended the same university, but she graduated from a prominent program that I was not accepted into. We both have green eyes and brown hair, but she is significantly more attractive and like a model. We're both slender and fit, but she has a stunning hourglass body. She appears far more stylish than I do and has tens of thousands of followers, despite the fact that she is not an influencer. In reality, we work for the same company. I'm pretty sure my ex met her at work, but she got a job in a prestigious division right out of college and probably makes more money than I do. She is a better version of me, 7 years younger. And the love of my life is dating her. For the past month, I've been spiraling. I can't quit thinking about my ex-fiancée and this girl. I peek at her Instagram every day and torture myself with her stunning photos. She's shared a dozen photos of my ex in the last few months, and he looks so happy, healthy, and fit. They've been on excursions together. He has brought her to his hometown. He's even shared a picture of them with a sappy remark, which he never did when we were together. I have no evidence, and I doubt my ex would do this, but I now believe he was at least interested in her while we were still together. She joined the organization around a year ago. I'm so worried about running into them. I understand that my behavior is compulsive and masochistic. I've uninstalled Instagram and promised myself I'd never do it again, only to wake up the next day, reinstall the app, and repeat the process. My therapist has been trying to help, but I can't get over this. I'm locked in a mental loop of self-loathing and self-pity, a bizarre combination of tremendous melancholy and latent wrath. I feel very depressed, useless, used up, rejected, and suddenly very old. I understand that comparison is the thief of joy. I know I'm still young enough to move on. I understand that social media is a highlight reel, and their relationship may not be ideal. I know this girl hasn't done anything wrong to me. I understand that my ex deserves to find his perfect girl. But none of this takes away from the reality that I expected to be pregnant with the love of my life by this time of year. Instead, I am alone, and he has found someone better. If you've had a similar experience, please offer your advice or sympathize with me. I do not know. I feel so worthless and alone. Update. Hello again, guys. It's been 3 months since I wrote about my inability to move on from my 7-year relationship with my ex-fiancée. While I wince at the thought of how terrible I was when I wrote that post, crying alone in that conference room, I was astounded by the sensitive, mature, and useful advice I received from users of this subreddit. These last few months have been an absolute roller coaster, and I felt I owed this subreddit an update after how much comfort and counsel you all provided me during some of my worst days. I don't think things would have turned out quite as well if I had continued to bottle up my repressed emotions and isolate myself. So I'm grateful to everyone who left comments and messaged me. Thank you very much. So this is what occurred. As several of you suggested, I blocked my ex-fiancé and his girlfriend on Instagram the same night I wrote that post. I believe that verbalizing how obsessive and masochistic my behavior was, rather than keeping it all inside, and finally feeling validated in my emotional reactions after reading your supportive comments, rather than feeling alone and crazy, triggered something in my brain. I vowed to break out of that self-destructive cycle, to stop tormenting myself with their gorgeous photographs, and to restore some sense of self-worth. It was a huge relief not to be constantly drawn to their new photos. Instead, I gave myself some time to recover rather than scratching at the scab every day. That weekend, I resolved to reconnect with my family and friends and stop acting that I was handling the breakup perfectly. They were tremendously compassionate, but also surprised that I had been able to conceal my terrible emotions so well. It seemed like I had instantaneously rebuilt my support network. I had no idea how emotionally isolated I'd gotten until I was able to be honest and open with the people in my life. I continued to avoid talking to friends who were shared friends with my ex because I didn't want to put anyone in an embarrassing situation. But I was able to reconnect with a couple of my other friends, and I took the initiative to finally organize some fun activities. Getting out of the house to enjoy breakfasts, hikes, and shows with my friends in recent months has been really beneficial to my mental health. Even though I am an introvert, simply being in various surroundings and focusing on people other than my ex was beneficial. I also chose to try another therapist based on your ideas. My initial therapist was fairly helpful, but considering that he was in his late 50s, I felt he couldn't relate to some of the complexities in my concerns. So there was a bit of a generational difference. My new therapist is extremely compatible with me and immediately comprehended the complexities of my issues. She has been quite helpful in addressing the underlying causes of my concerns, and she has been able to validate and examine my emotions in a much more intimate manner. If you're having trouble finding a therapist who is a good fit for you, I strongly advise you to look around. Therapy is definitely not one size fits all. Another frequent suggestion from you was to locate another employment away from my ex-fiancé and his girlfriend. I didn't think it was possible because the job market in my field isn't fantastic right now. However, I began aggressively looking for other opportunities. I updated my resume, filled out a few applications, and, surprisingly, got an interview. Then, unexpectedly, someone in my division above me left to work for a competitor. The senior managers wanted to fill his position fast, so they went with an internal hire. After 5 or 6 rounds of interviews, God, I loathe them, I was hired. I am quite pleased for this promotion. Not only is the salary significantly higher, but the hours are more consistent as well. It's crazy, I feel like my life's momentum has flipped so suddenly. And I've finally got an office. It's small, but I truly like it. The only drawback was that this promotion required me to remain working in the same building, albeit a very large one, as my ex. I ran into my ex as I was leaving work before Christmas, which was something I had been dreading. We exchanged some niceties, and he admired my new haircut. I thanked him, wished him well, and said that I needed to hurry to catch the next train. I wish I could say I was calm and collected, but I was so scared to meet him again after 6 months that I practically shook. On the way home, I relaxed and realized, hey, that wasn't so bad. He looked good, but I didn't get any feelings of grief or yearning. I largely felt uneasy, as if we had become strangers again. I didn't feel the customary want to stalk his Instagram and was really relieved to discover that he was doing well, especially because I'd cared for him for so many years. I felt like I was finally moving forward. The next morning, I awoke to a dozen messages from my ex-fiancé. They started at roughly 2 a.m. These were slightly nonsensical in times, so I'm guessing he was a little inebriated when he sent them. They were all long walls of text, which shocked me because he doesn't usually express his feelings verbally. He wrote that he couldn't stop thinking about me when we met outside the workplace. He expressed sadness that we were no longer friends because I still felt like his best buddy. And he lamented how things turned out. He said he wondered if he'd made a major mistake in a moment of weakness and upended his entire life, and that seeing me made him regret it all. He apparently saw that I had blocked him on Instagram, which I thought was humorous given how much I had been following his account, and he stated it made him really upset. I concluded from his texts that he had most likely broken up with the woman I had seen on his Instagram. He stated that he thought he had been hunting for a perfect lady who does not exist, and that he wanted to reignite our spark after failing to find it with others. I won't lie, reading his texts was shocking. I was trembling and having trouble processing a lot of things at first. Part of me wished, impulsively, to give him another chance. But after pondering his words for a day, I concluded that he was less sorry for losing our relationship and more regretful that the better pastures he wanted were not as green as he had hoped. I tried to react sweetly but firmly, noting that while I valued and respected our friendship, I no longer trusted him to the same extent that I once did. I told him that I believed it would be complicated and painful for us to become friends in the near future. I stated how hurt I was when he surprised me after assuring that everything was well, and how I had battled for a long time to figure out what was missing in our relationship. But, ultimately, I felt that if he thought the missing piece was so important that he wanted to leave after all those years together, we probably weren't meant to be. I wished him the best. He did not reply to my mails. I was disturbed by the whole affair, but I went on to enjoy my holiday break with my family, even attending my friend's New Year's Eve party, which I had considered skipping. Well, I'm so pleased I didn't skip the party since I met a fantastic man there. He's hilarious, clever, cute, engaging, empathetic, and anxious to settle down and have children, despite having recently ended a long-term relationship. We've been on 3 dates so far, and at the risk of sounding overly exuberant, they've been the best of my life. We want to take it slowly because we were both in long-term relationships only a year ago, but we've been surprised by how similar our personalities, hobbies, and aspirations are. Frankly, we both want to start a family as soon as feasible. So, while I try not to be overconfident in our relationship, I am also very excited to see where it goes. To summarize, thanks in large part to the counsel I received 3 months ago on this subreddit, I've emerged from a very dark place and am now cautiously excited about my future, For the first time in a long time. My boyfriend and I just had a baby when his ex-mother-in-law suddenly claimed the child was her grandchild, causing chaos at the hospital. Okay, Reddit, I really need some advice. I'm 29 years old, and my 30-year-old partner Mark and I just welcomed our daughter Lily 2 weeks ago. Lily is incredible, healthy, and the utter joy of our lives. Getting here, however, has been a daytime soap opera-worthy drama, and it all boils down to two really tough mothers, my ex-mother-in-law and Mark's mother. To comprehend the current situation, I need to give you some background. I was previously married, however briefly. I met my ex-husband David, 31 million, when I was 22. We were young, impetuous, and believed we were madly in love. We got married after roughly 8 months of dating. It was a fiasco nearly from the beginning. We were simply fundamentally incompatible. We disagreed about everything, from how to load the dishwasher, really, to our long-term objectives. He wanted to stay in our small hometown forever, purchase a house with a white picket fence, and start having children right away. In my late 20s, I wanted to focus on my job and perhaps consider having children. We had been married for a little more than a year before we recognized it was a mistake. There was no dramatic outburst, no infidelity, just a quiet, agonizing awareness that we were making each other unhappy. We chose to divorce. It was unexpectedly amicable. We didn't detest each other, we simply realized we were better off apart. We did not have any shared assets or children, so the legal process was relatively simple. My parents were supportive. They were never major fans of David. They felt he was dull, to be honest, and all they wanted was for me to be happy. But David's mother was quite different. Let us call her Susan. She is the type of lady who has her entire life planned out, and she wants everyone around her to follow suit, whether they want it or not. She is also profoundly devout, believing that divorce is a sin regardless of the circumstances. Susan had an image of David and me as the ideal conventional couple. She was distraught when we broke up. She tried everything to convince us to work things out, including guilt trips, tearful phone calls, and even an unannounced visit to my apartment with a marriage counselor. It was quite awkward and uncomfortable. I tried to be courteous and considerate, but I needed to be firm. I told her that while I appreciated her concern, the choice was final. The divorce was settled approximately 7 years ago. I relocated to a different city, found a terrific job, and began a completely new life. I severed off touch with David and Susan. It was not out of malice, it was simply essential for me to move on. We were not social media pals, and we had no shared friends, so it was a clean break. Then, around a year and a half ago, I met Mark. We met during a work conference. We started conversing during a coffee break and instantly clicked. He was humorous, smart, and kind, and we shared a love of travel and adventure. We exchanged numbers and began dating shortly after. Mark knew about my prior marriage from the start. It was not a secret. I told him the whole tale on our second date, and he was unconcerned. He claimed it was in the past, and it didn't change his feelings about me. He'd been in a couple long-term relationships before, so he knew that not everything works out. We fell in love instantly. It was different from my relationship with David. Mark made it feel effortless, natural, and exciting. We had a lot in common and really loved each other's company. Around 6 months into our relationship, I met Mark's parents. His father, John, is the loveliest, most laid-back person you will ever meet. He greeted me warmly and made me feel right at home. Mark's mother, Carol, had a different narrative. Carol is complex. She is highly polished, very proper, and very opinionated. She's also quite attached to Mark, her only child. From the time I met her, I could tell she was assessing me and finding flaws in me. She was cordial, but there was a noticeable coolness in the air. She made a few subtle digs at my divorce, nothing overtly nasty, but things like, "Oh, you've been married before? That's interesting." Or, "I always believed that marriage is forever, no matter what." She also stated that she anticipated Mark to settle down and have a typical family, just as Susan had wished for David. I attempted to brush it off. I assumed she was simply protective of her son, and I hoped she'd warm up to me gradually. But she never actually did. She was always nice, but never truly friendly. She'd ask me questions about my profession and my family, but it felt more like an interrogation than a conversation. Then, around 8 months ago, I discovered I was pregnant. It was a nice surprise. Mark and I had talked about having kids in the future, but we weren't actively trying. We were both excited though. We chose not to marry immediately away. I'd already been through one hasty wedding and didn't want to go through it again. I wanted to be sure that we were getting married for the right reasons, not just because we were expecting a child. Mark fully understood and supported my decision. We informed our family. My parents were overjoyed. They had always wanted grandchildren. John was equally excited. He began talking about building a treehouse and teaching the infant to fish. Carol, as one could expect, was unhappy. She didn't say anything directly unpleasant, but her displeasure was obvious. She continued saying things like, "Well, I suppose it's not the traditional way to do things." And, "I just hope you're both prepared for the challenges of parenthood." She also began implying strongly that we should marry before the kid arrived. The pregnancy itself went relatively smoothly. I had some morning sickness in the first trimester, but overall I felt fine. Mark was quite supportive. He attended all of my doctor's appointments, read all of the baby books, and even began learning to cook, which was a little miracle. Throughout the pregnancy, Carol was a source of stress. She'd contact me on a regular basis, purportedly to check in, but the calls were always more like lectures. She would advise me what I should eat, how much I should exercise, and which parenting books I should read. She even sent me a list of recommended baby names, all of which were quite outdated and stuffy. I tried to be patient and understanding. I understood she was simply trying to help in her own way, but it was exhausting. I felt as though I was constantly being scrutinized and chastised. Then, approximately a month before my due date, something totally unexpected occurred. I received a text message from an unfamiliar phone number. The message went, "Is this OP? It's Susan, David's mom. We need to talk. It's about the baby." My heart sank. I hadn't communicated with Susan in years. Why is she approaching me now? And what did she mean by "it's about the baby"? I showed Mark the text. He was just as perplexed as I was. We decided that I should contact her back and see what was going on. I called Susan, and she instantly answered. She sounded frantic. She responded, "I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think the baby you're carrying is David's." I was speechless. I honestly could not understand what she was saying. "What? Susan, that's impossible. I haven't seen David in years." She mentioned that she saw a photo of me on social media. Apparently, one of my distant relatives had tagged me in a photo, and I was obviously pregnant. She'd done some research, which I'm pretty sure included researching my online profiles, and determined that the timing was suitable. She was sure that I had secretly reconciled with David and that this baby was his. I tried to politely convey to her that she was entirely wrong. I informed her about Mark and how long we had been together, but she would not listen. She insisted that I was lying and that I should come clean for the sake of the baby. The chat concluded with her threatening to show up at the hospital if I went into labor. I hung up the phone, thoroughly shaken and confused. I told Mark everything. He was infuriated. He couldn't believe Susan had accused me of something so absurd. He wanted to call her and tell her what was on his mind, but I urged him not to. I did not want to exacerbate the matter. We decided to ignore Susan and hope she'd come to her senses. We assumed she was simply grabbing at straws, eager for her son to have a child. Then, 2 weeks ago, I went into labor. After a long and arduous labor, our beautiful daughter Lily was born. Mark was with me the whole time, and he was incredible. We were in the recovery room, fatigued but elated, when there was a ruckus outside the door. Susan burst into the room, followed by a confused-looking security guard. She began to scream, "That's my grandchild. I know it. You need to tell the truth. You've been lying to everyone." It was a total nightmare. I was still in recovery from childbirth. I was hormonal, and I felt completely humiliated. Mark intervened and told Susan to go, but she refused. It required 2 security personnel to forcibly remove her from the room. The entire situation was quite disturbing. I was furious with Susan. When we returned home from the hospital, I decided to phone David. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but I felt compelled to clear the air and ensure he understood what his mother had done. He answered the phone, clearly astonished to hear from me. I explained the scenario, and he was shocked. He apologized profusely for his mother's actions. He said that he had been dating a new woman, Serene. Serene and I have a similar first name, but not precisely the same. Imagine my name is Serena, and hers is Serene. Similar, but not the same. David had been keeping Serene a secret from his mother. Susan was fascinated with him remarrying and having children, and he didn't want to deal with her expectations. Susan had apparently overheard David's phone conversation with Serene around a month ago. She misheard the name and assumed he uttered my name. She assumed right away that David and I had reconciled. David, being a bit of a coward, his words, not mine, had not corrected her. He reasoned that it was better to let her think whatever she wanted than to cope with her reaction to his new connection. He explained that I intended to keep things quiet, which is why she had not heard from me. Susan's sister was also in the hospital for a routine appointment on the day I went into labor. She'd only met me a few times years ago, but she was aware of Susan's preoccupation with me and David. When she saw me, very pregnant, being brought to labor and delivery, she immediately contacted Susan. Susan ended up at my hospital room, thinking that I was carrying her grandson. David apologized profusely. He claimed he was an idiot who should have told his mother the truth a long time ago. He also told me that he tried to speak with his mother, but she refused to believe him. She was convinced he was only covering for me. He stated he and Susan were moving to another state to be closer to Serene, so I wouldn't have to worry about her anymore. I told him I appreciated his apology, but what he and his mother had done was extremely devastating. I told him I didn't want to speak with him or Susan again. Mark was listening to the entire exchange. He was infuriated. He claimed he couldn't believe David and Susan had been so selfish and irresponsible. It established that I wasn't crazy, but it didn't address the larger issue, Carol. Mark informed his parents about the incident in the hospital. Of course, John was outraged. He could not believe Susan would do something so outrageous. Carol, on the other hand, remained unusually quiet. She did not defend Susan, and she did not criticize her either. She simply stated, "Well, it's certainly a complicated situation." A few days later, Carol came to see us. She brought a gift for Lily, a really costly baby blanket that was completely not my style. She held Lily for a few minutes, fawning over her, and then got down to business. She went on. "Mark, I've been thinking a lot about this whole situation, and I think for everyone's peace of mind, it would be best if you got a paternity test." I was stunned. I couldn't believe she was making that suggestion. Mark glanced at me, his eyes filled with a mix of rage and remorse. He responded, "Mom, I'm not doing that. I trust OP completely. This is ridiculous." Carol did not back down. She responded, "It's not about trust, Mark. It's about being responsible. You need to know for sure. What if Susan is right? What if this baby is David's?" I eventually spoke up. I corrected myself. "Carol, I can assure you this baby is Mark's. I haven't been with anyone else since we met. This is insulting." She fixed me with a harsh, hard stare. "I'm just trying to protect my son," she explained. "I'm sure you understand." The conversation deteriorated from there. It ended with Mark telling his mother that he would not even contemplate a paternity test and that if she couldn't trust him and respect his relationship with me, she wasn't welcome in our family. She stormed out, and we haven't heard from her again. Mark tried calling her several times, but she would not answer. John has phoned Mark, and he is really furious about the situation. He's caught in the center and doesn't know what to do. So, Reddit, here I am. I'm a new mom navigating the responsibilities of parenting while simultaneously dealing with this terrible family drama. I'm upset and angry that Carol would question my honesty and Mark's paternity. I'm also concerned about the long-term influence on Mark's connection with his mother. I informed Carol that if she wanted to continue pressing the DNA test issue, she could kick rocks. I didn't say those exact words. I was more polite, but the message was clear. I told her that if she couldn't accept Lily as Mark's daughter without proof, she didn't have to be a member of our family. Aita? I want Mark to have a relationship with his mother, but I also refuse to be treated so disrespectfully. And I certainly do not want my daughter to grow up with someone who doubts her parentage. Any tips or recommendations will be considered. Update 1. Wow. I did not anticipate this post to get that viral. Thank you to everyone for their encouragement and wisdom. It's been quite reassuring to learn that I'm not crazy and that Carol's behavior is utterly out of character. Many of you suggested that I talk to Mark about having clear boundaries with his mother, and you are completely correct. I had been postponing the talk because I was fatigued and did not want to deal with any more turmoil, but it had to happen. So, last night, after Lily was sleeping, Mark and I had a long conversation. Carol's demand for a paternity test wounded and disrespected me, and I told him so. I also expressed concern about the damage this was having on his relationship with his father John. Mark absolutely understood. He stated that he was furious with his mother, not only for the paternity test request, but also for her behavior throughout my pregnancy. He explained that he had been making excuses for her for years, but he was finally seeing her for who she truly is, a controlling, manipulative woman who is more concerned with her personal image than her son's pleasure. He told me he tried contacting her again, but she still did not answer. He left her a voicemail in which he expressed his disappointment with her and stated that he would not contact her again unless she apologized to me and accepted Lily as his daughter, no questions asked. He also mentioned he had spoken with John again. John is heartbroken by the circumstances. He adores Carol, but he also understands that she is in the wrong. He told Mark that he was thinking of staying with us for a while to get away from Carol and spend more time with Lily. Mark and I agreed to welcome John with open arms. We have an extra bedroom and Lily adores him. It would be wonderful to have his assistance, and it would also provide him with a reprieve from his toxic home situation. Some of you questioned my parents and why they weren't more involved. That's a valid question, and I should have addressed it in the original piece. My folks live fairly far away, on the opposite side of the country, actually. They are likewise in their late 50s and not in good health. Traveling vast distances is quite difficult for them, especially given the current constraints and worries. We communicate to them on video calls virtually every day, and they adore Lily even from a distance. They are really supportive of me and Mark, and they were outraged when I told them about Susan's outburst in the hospital and Carol's subsequent behavior. They wish they could aid, but they are physically unable to do so. They send their love and support, which means everything to me. They also stated that if John needed a place to crash, they would gladly contribute some money and urged me to find him a suitable retirement home. It was quite sweet of them. So that's where things are right now. Carol is still giving us the quiet treatment. John is considering moving in with us. Mark and I are attempting to concentrate on being parents to our wonderful little girl. I'm no longer attempting to placate Carol or avoid her sentiments. I'm prioritizing my family, which is what matters most. I will keep you informed of any additional developments. Thank you for your continued support. Update 2. Things have intensified. John arrived to stay with us a few days ago. He arrived with a small luggage and a very sorrowful attitude. He explained that Carol had rarely spoken to him since Mark's last phone contact. She was cold and distant, and he couldn't take it anymore. He spent the first day largely snuggling Lily and talking with Mark. He seemed relieved to be free of the stress and negativity. He kept emphasizing how much he loved Lily and was happy for the opportunity to spend time with her. Carol then showed up uninvited at our door yesterday. I was in the nursery, feeding Lily, when the doorbell rang. Mark responded, and I could hear Carol's voice, loud and strident. When I entered the living room, I noticed a tight atmosphere. Carol stood in the doorway, enraged. John sat on the couch, looking defeated. Mark was standing between them with his arms crossed. Carol requested that John return home immediately. She complained that he was being foolish and was humiliating her. She accused me of manipulating him and using him against her. John attempted to speak, but Carol stifled him. She just kept shouting and raving, accusing me of various things. Mark finally had enough. He informed Carol unequivocally that she needed to leave. He stated that she was not welcome in our home unless she apologized to me and embraced Lily without reservation. Carol appeared shocked. She obviously wasn't used to Mark standing up to her. She stuttered for a while before turning on her heels and storming out, slamming the door behind her. The whole situation was quite stressful. I felt terrible for John. He seemed lost and confused. He continually apologized to me, even though he had done nothing wrong. Mark and I reassured him that he could stay with us as long as he needed. We told him we loved him and were glad we had him. After John had gone to bed, Mark and I talked. We both agreed that Carol's actions were totally wrong. We determined that we needed to establish even stricter boundaries. Mark texted Carol that we would be in no communication until she sought professional help for her controlling conduct and apologized to both me and John. He said that we loved her, but we couldn't let her continue to insult us and ruin our lives. It's been a few days since we've heard from her. I am not sure what to expect. Update 3. It had been roughly a week since Carol's dramatic visit. We haven't heard anything from her, no calls, texts, angry emails, nothing. John, on the other hand, has settled in well. He's a big help to Lily, and he obviously enjoys spending time with her. He reads to her, sings to her, and takes her on walks in the stroller. It is heartwarming to watch. He's also become more candid about his marriage. He told Mark and me that he has been unhappy for years. He claimed that Carol has always been controlling, but it has gotten worse over time. He feels that he's lost himself in the relationship and has been going through the motions. He began attending a therapist, which Mark and I encouraged. He believes it's helping him process his emotions and figure out what he wants for the future. He isn't sure if he wants to stay married to Carol, even if she apologizes. He claims he needs to think about what is best for him for once. Mark totally supports his father, whatever he decides. He's just thrilled John's finally sticking up for himself. As for me, I'm attempting to concentrate on Lily and on building a quiet, loving environment for our family. I'm still upset and outraged over Carol's actions, but I'm trying not to let them consume me. I've started thinking about returning to work part-time. My maternity leave is nearly over, and I miss using my abilities. Mark is entirely on board, and John has offered to assist with childcare. We are also starting to arrange Lily's first birthday party. The party will be modest and exclusive, with only close relatives and friends. Obviously, Carol will not be invited. It's strange to consider celebrating a huge milestone without Mark's mother present, but I just don't see any other option. She made her decision, and she must deal with the consequences. I'm still hopeful that one day she'll see reason and apologize, but I'm not holding my breath. Update 4. A few tiny but major events have occurred. First, John applied for legal separation from Carol. He spoke with a lawyer and determined that it was the best course of action, at least for now. He explained that he needed to create some formal gap between them. He informed Carol of his decision, and she did not take it well. She called Mark, yelling and crying, accusing him of turning his father against her. Mark stayed calm, telling her that John had made his own decision and she should respect it. After a few days, we received a letter from Carol's lawyer. It was a cease and desist letter, requesting that we stop disseminating false and defamatory material about her. Apparently, she claims that we have been telling others that she is mentally ill and a lousy grandma. It's utterly ludicrous, of course. We haven't discussed her with anyone other than John's therapist, which is strictly secret. We're fairly certain she's just attempting to bully and scare us into backing down. Mark consulted his own lawyer, who urged us to disregard the letter. He claimed it was unfounded and Carol had no legal basis to stand on. So, that is where we are. John is legally separated from Carol, and we are facing a ridiculous legal threat. It's all quite stressful, but we're trying to remain strong and unified. On a more positive note, Lily is flourishing. She's growing and maturing so quickly. She began babbling and smiling continuously. She is the most lovely little child, and she brings so much happiness into our life. I was kicked out of the house because my sister made up a story about me selling drugs. My parents believed her without any evidence. Growing up, my family placed a huge priority on appearances and achievements. My father, Benjamin, 57 male, works at a prestigious insurance company and is very respected in his area. My mother, Olivia, 56 female, is a biology professor and the ideal caring mother who is always there for us. However, everything in our family came with stipulations. We had to appear and behave flawlessly, and perfect was determined by how well we fulfilled my parents' expectations. My older sister, Isabella, 30 female, or Bella as everyone nicknamed her, embodied their dream. She's an engineer. She's 4 years older than me. She was highly successful and seemed to handle life with ease, constantly gaining praise, honors, and admiration from our parents. On the other hand, I was quieter, more reserved, and a little rebellious. I was intelligent, but I decided to pursue my own way. My hobbies did not always correspond with my parents' expectations of success. Well, I was an English major, which they did not appreciate, but they accepted our disagreements as long as I stayed within their parameters. I attempted to avoid crossing any lines. Regardless of all our differences, I admired Bella. She was everything our parents intended, and I saw her as someone I could rely on and learn from. I never imagined she'd do something like this to me. 6 years ago, my world was turned upside down due to Bella's massive deception. I was 20, still in college, and attempting to plan my future. Bella, our parents' favorite, was the golden kid. She was accomplished, responsible, and always on their good side. Meanwhile, I felt like I'd never measure up, always living in her shadow. Things changed radically for Bella a few months before she told that falsehood. She begged me to assist her in concealing a potentially dangerous situation in which she was involved. Basically, she had made some poor decisions and wanted me to keep my mouth shut about them. She was involved with some questionable persons and situations, which made me uncomfortable and did not sit well with me. She asked me to lie to our parents about it and provide her an alibi. She claimed it was a family duty, and that I owed her because she had always supported me. However, something felt off, and I didn't want to get involved in her plans. I was trying to keep my own life together, and lying for her seemed like a recipe for catastrophe. I told her I wouldn't do it since I didn't want to take any risks. She became enraged, acting as if my refusal was a major betrayal. Her reaction was powerful, almost frightening. I recall her warning that if I crossed her, I would regret it and that she would find a way to hold me accountable. At the time, I assumed it was just theatrics and she would settle down. Looking back, that moment appeared to be the catalyst for everything that followed. Within weeks, Bella began to discreetly undercut me. Soon after, she told our parents a massive falsehood. She told our parents I was selling drugs in college. This was a massive, terrible falsehood that stunned me. I had never used drugs, let alone sold them. But Bella spoke so convincingly that my parents believed her without question. To this day, I don't understand why she did it. We weren't particularly close, but neither were we enemies. I mean, she is or was my sister. I could never have imagined she would do something so wrong to me. This was a falsehood that could damage my future, and I honestly believed it did. My father, Benjamin, responded like a hurricane. He did not ask any questions or allow me to clarify. His rage struck me hard, deeper than I imagined. I sensed his despair and disgust, as if I were no longer his daughter. My mother, Olivia, was quiet, but her silence hurt just as much. She looked at me with tremendous disappointment, as if I had shattered all of her expectations for me. Meanwhile, Bella stood to one side, expressionless. She didn't say anything or acknowledge the chaos she caused. She just watched my folks kick me out. That day, I was thrown out of the house. I had no hope of explaining or understanding what was going on. I left with nothing and had to drop out of college since I couldn't afford it without their help. My future felt like it had vanished overnight. I spent the next few months living with friends, moving from couch to couch and doing whatever work I could find. I felt hopeless. I had big goals, and everything I had worked for was just gone. I tried to contact my parents, thinking they would see the truth. Every call resulted in my being turned away. My father would hang up before I could say anything, and my mother would simply repeat her disparaging statements, refusing to listen or consider them inappropriate. I kept hoping they'd see through Bella's falsehoods and remember who I truly was, but they'd already decided. In their view, I was guilty, and that was it. Years have passed. I gradually learned how to reconstruct my life from scratch. I saved every penny from my waitressing job and then returned to school part-time. It was difficult, but I was determined to show myself that I could build my future without their assistance. Throughout this journey, I met folks who became my chosen family, friends who recognized my genuine self and stood by me after my own family had turned away. They helped me recognize my worth, improved my recovery, and restored my self-esteem. I eventually graduated, obtained a solid job, and began living a life I was proud of. Then I found my ideal fiancé, Mark, 27 million. He was gentle and understanding, everything I had been lacking. When I told him about my family, he didn't criticize or pity me. Instead, he explained that family is more than just blood. I have the right to select who comes into my life. With him, I actually felt loved and accepted. For the first time, I began to believe that I did not require my parents' approval to be complete. As our wedding day approached, thoughts of my family reappeared. I hadn't seen them in 6 years. Part of me wanted to reach out and give them the opportunity to make amends. But every time I thought about it, bitter memories flooded back. Rejection, embarrassment, and how they had discarded me without a second thought. Why should they be a part of one of the happiest days of my life if they were not present at my most difficult times? I received an unexpected message from my father. I was surprised to see his name appear on my phone after all these years. The message was brief and straightforward. He informed me that my mother was seriously ill and wanted to meet me since she missed me. There was no apology or acknowledgement of the past. There is no awareness of the harm they have caused. Just a little word on my mother's illness and her desire to reconnect. He also indicated that he was aware of my approaching wedding and that he and my mother wanted to be involved. It felt weird and weighty to realize they had suddenly longed to reach out. Where was this compassion while I was battling to survive after they abandoned me? They missed my graduation, first job, and pretty much everything else throughout my life. Now when my mother is ill, they act as if those 6 years didn't matter, as if I could just forgive and forget. It appeared so unjust. I may sound selfish, but this caught me off guard, and I didn't feel good about it. They weren't present during the difficult times, but now they wanted to be a part of the happy ones. A rush of emotions overtook me. I felt guilty when I thought about my mother being unwell. Despite everything, she was still my mother, and the thought of her suffering was difficult to bear. I realized that her desire to see me was not solely for the wedding. It could be about seeking closure or making peace before it's too late. But forgiving them felt impossible after everything they had put me through. Abandonment, disbelief, and the difficulties I faced alone. How could I allow them back into my life as if nothing had happened? Following the text, I received several more texts from relatives I had no idea existed. They said that it was terrible of me not to include my parents in my wedding, and that whatever happened recently should not be considered in light of everything they had done for me throughout my life. This definitely got on my nerves. It was hilarious how they came up when I didn't ask my parents to my wedding but couldn't help me when I was almost homeless. I told my fiancé about it, and he immediately told me to ignore my relatives' texts because they were irrelevant. He has informed me that he would support whatever decision I make, but he has also reminded me that my wedding day should be about us being happy and enjoying ourselves, rather than something from the past that hurts and the unresolved feelings that come with it. He advised me to examine what would make me happy in the long run, not just right now. I keep wondering if pushing them away now will merely cause me more anguish. Or will allowing them return make everything worse for me? I'm feeling conflicted. I've worked hard to forge my own path and construct a life without them. Part of me wants to defend it, and I'm afraid that letting them back in will damage everything I've made. But part of me feels bad, especially when my mother's health is a concern. I can't deny that she's attempting to reach out now, even if it feels like it's too late. I keep believing that involving them in the wedding will allow me to finally move on and leave the past behind. But then I remember that they abandoned me based solely on Bella's words, no proof or anything. I'm not sure whether I can just forget about the previous 6 years. My wedding is in a few months, and I am really confused. Should I leave things as they are or let them back in? To be really honest, I'm not sure if I want them back in my life, therefore I need some advice. Aida for not allowing my parents back into my life after they believed my sister's lies and abandoned me. Update 1. It's been a few weeks since I posted. I read a few comments and am happy that most people believe I am not being unreasonable here. Anyway, I still feel like I'm trapped in a whirlwind. I was quite nervous after hearing the news from my father regarding my mother's illness and wanting to visit me. I considered blocking their phone numbers, but I was also concerned that by not giving them a chance, I would come to regret it. Then, surprisingly, my sister Bella reached out. I received an unexpected SMS from her informing me that she had learned of my impending marriage. She added that she knew Mom was sick and wanted to rectify things before it was too late. It seemed like everything had changed in an instant. Bella, the one who had brought me so much pain, was now discussing family and healing. She expressed her longing for me and highlighted the importance of our family's reunion. She explained that I had always been a part of her life and that she wanted us to be at peace. But all I could think of was her betrayal, which had ruined everything. My father's message had already troubled me, and Bella's text simply added to the perplexity. What did she expect of me? Did she truly believe I could forgive her with a few kind words? She refused to apologize or acknowledge the issues she caused. Instead, she continued emphasizing how family was the most essential thing, especially since Mom's health was diminishing. It all felt false, as if she was only reaching out now to relieve her guilt. I couldn't help but wonder if there was another motive for her message, one that I wasn't perceiving. She had been cold and calculating when she lied about me, and I couldn't get the impression that it was all about her image. The prospect of seeing Bella after so many years was like revisiting an old sore. Still, the fact that my mother was ill made me feel differently. I felt awful for wanting to keep them out when there was a chance she wanted to make amends. But every time I considered forgiving them, every memory from the past came flooding back even stronger. I wondered if they'd ever acknowledge the troubles they produced for me. The idea of them attending my wedding felt almost ludicrous, as if they could simply show up as proud parents after all this time. I continued thinking about my fiancé's recommendation to prioritize my long-term happiness. My wedding should be a joyful celebration, not a source of stress. But how could I find peace if I was still angry? Could I truly move on if I never allowed them back into my life? I couldn't see Bella sitting in the front row like nothing had happened. It felt awful to even consider including them after what they had done. I decided to respond to Bella, but I kept it quick. I told her I needed some time to consider and didn't know how I felt about her or our parents attending the wedding. I remarked that I was unsure how I felt about them after everything that had happened between us. I'm not sure why, but I hoped she understood. However, her response was simply another message about family, with no indication of regret or acknowledgement of her conduct. She even had the audacity to declare that she understood my emotions but hoped I would see the larger picture and let the past go for Mom's sake. After her response, I was more perplexed than ever. I thought having time to dwell on my emotions would help, but it actually made things worse. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years began to contact me, encouraging me to let go of my anger and warning me that if I didn't reunite with my family soon, I'd regret it. They seemed to only know a portion of the tale and believed I was being unfair. Their words hurt, but I realized they had no idea what I had gone through. This simply increased my uncertainty and fury. A few days later, my dad sent me another mail with further information concerning Mom's condition. He didn't give much information, but it was evident she wasn't doing well. He said Mom had always loved me and wanted us to be a family again. It felt weird, as if he was attempting to make me feel guilty rather than apologizing or acknowledging my grief. I questioned whether he comprehended the consequences of their actions. I spent several hours considering what I would say if I met them again. I imagined telling them about the years of struggle, the nights spent feeling completely alone, and the betrayal I still held. But deep inside, I knew it wouldn't change anything. They'd probably find a way to excuse their actions or reject my emotions, claiming I was being exaggerated. Still, the notion of my mother being ill weighed on me. Was I wrong to hold on to my rage when she could be facing significant consequences? My fiancé has been an excellent source of support, reminding me that my sentiments are valid and that I can establish my own boundaries. He pledged to stand by me regardless of what I decided. I consider myself fortunate to have someone who actually understands my suffering and does not encourage me to forgive solely for the sake of appearances. He underlined that it is my decision, but I can feel the weight of it all. As the wedding date approaches, the pressure builds. I'm torn between wanting to let my parents and Bella back into my life for some peace and shielding myself from further pain. My mother's condition complicates matters even further. I'm worried that if I don't let them back in now, I'll regret it later. However, I'm concerned that opening the door would result in even more heartache. Bella's letter keeps replaying in my head, making me question whether I'm being too harsh. But then I realize that she never expressed regret or acknowledged the harm she caused. How can I move forward when the past still feels so fresh? I'm left wondering if forgiving them will actually help me recover or simply reopen old scars. My wedding should be a pleasant moment, but it is currently marred with unresolved feelings. I'm at a stage where I'm not sure if bringing them back in will offer me any closure or simply more pain. So here I am, still hesitant and contemplating. Is inviting them back into my life the right decision, or am I setting myself up for disappointment? Update 2. Hey, it has been roughly 3 weeks since my last post. A few days after the previous update, I reached my limit and went to see my family. After weeks of putting it off, I couldn't ignore my mother's critical illness. Part of me wanted to keep my distance, but I felt guilty, and I knew I'd regret not seeing her one more time if she didn't improve. It was an hour-long drive to their place, and it was difficult to remain calm. But I kept telling myself I was doing this for my mother, not for Dad or Bella. But that didn't make things any simpler. I was frightened to see the house again. I have so many memories there. I had lived in that house for my entire life until 6 years ago. I was forced to go, and now I feel compelled to return. When I got to the house, it felt odd. It had been so long, but everything seemed practically the same. To my astonishment, my mother was the only one present, seated in a chair near the window. I barely recognized her. My father had not arrived yet, which was somewhat of a relief. But I knew the confrontation was still imminent. It pained my heart to see her so weak and fatigued. She appeared so small, and I just wanted to hug and cry. I could only think about how much time had been lost. We could have spent a lot of time together. If Bella hadn't pulled that stunt, I wouldn't have been as stunned by Mom's situation. If I had been by her side all those years, I would have been able to aid her in some manner. My older sister, however, denied me this opportunity. Mom looked both thrilled and sad to see me. For the first time in my life, I didn't perceive my mother as the authoritative figure I strove so hard to impress. She was merely a mother. A human who had made mistakes. She sincerely apologized. She was pretty clear that she regretted not reaching out to me. She explained that she had not contacted out in all these years because she was humiliated. She stated that by the time she discovered Bella had lied, it was too late, and she assumed I would never forgive her. She also mentioned that she had considered reaching out to me several times. She penned several letters that she never sent. She apologized multiple times. Hearing her articulate it made me feel both sad and relieved. There was no discussion of family obligations or expectations. There was no compulsion to forgive her or forget what happened. She simply accepted responsibility for her mistakes and apologized. It was too much to take in. A part of me wanted to shout and tell her how difficult it was for me. But I couldn't. I just hugged her and told her it was fine. I truly forgave her. It was as if I never got furious at her. She was simply left with regret, and I didn't want to make matters worse. I only wanted to be by her side. My father walked in, and the atmosphere immediately altered. He entered with confidence, as if he had done nothing wrong. He did not apologize or acknowledge the anguish he had caused me. Instead, he dismissed my feelings as insignificant, advising that I move on for the sake of the family. He appeared to believe he was the victim since I had withdrawn myself for so long. He completely missed my mother's point of view. I tried to remain calm, but rage rose within me. When I conveyed how hurt I was by everything that had happened and how I had made ends meet over the last 6 years, he disregarded it with phrases like, "Oh, we thought we were doing what was best for the family." He refused to accept responsibility for his acts and kept shifting the focus, making it appear as if I was to blame for not contacting them throughout the years. My mother looked concerned, but she remained silent. Perhaps she was tired of Dad and our never-ending disputes. My father persisted in his efforts to persuade me that my decision to stay away was wrong. It was frustrating, and I had a familiar sense of impotence from my childhood. As if my voice didn't matter. When I asked about Isabella and where she was, they replied she couldn't make it. It was strange because she had reached out, mentioning family and forgiveness, but when it came time to confront the matter, she was missing. Deep down, I wasn't really surprised. I assumed she would avoid any serious disagreement, even if she was the one who began it. She had caused the commotion and left everyone else to deal with it. After the visit, I was fatigued. Instead of the tranquility I desired, I sat silently as my father lectured me, hoping he could persuade me to forgive them. However, I understood I didn't need his approval and didn't have to fit in with a family that had previously let me down so readily. Before I departed, my mother requested that I return soon. She sounded desperate and appeared sorrowful. I wasn't sure if I'd be back, but I couldn't say goodbye forever. I hugged her and promised to keep in touch, encouraging her to contact me whenever she wanted or needed to. I couldn't think straight on the journey back to my place. I felt conflicted. My mother's apology was genuine and meant more to me than I realized, but my father's attitude and Isabella's absence made me bitter, bringing back the anguish I had tried to ignore. I wanted to forgive them and go on, but I wasn't sure how to do so without losing my mind. I forgive Mom. I don't have anything against her anymore. But what about Dad and Bella? I'm not quite sure about them. My wedding is in a month, and I'm not sure whether I'll invite them or keep them in my life. I'm confident I'll stay in touch with Mom. I might invite her. However, as I already stated, I am unsure about Dad and Bella. Perhaps it is best to go without them, maintaining a safe distance for my own peace of mind. It is difficult, especially since my mother may not have much time left. I feel a mix of remorse, hatred, and love, and I'm not sure whether I'll ever get the closure I desire. I honestly am not sure what my next step will be. I'll keep you updated if anything happens. Update 3. Hello everyone, it has been a long time since I provided an update. It has been 6 months, and so much has transpired. I would have provided an update sooner, but I simply wanted to comprehend everything. Mark and I had a small private wedding. After everything with my family, we wanted a quiet day focused on us. I decided to invite my mother and father. My mother was quite ill, and I knew I'd be disappointed if she couldn't go. It was easy to invite her because she had made an effort with me, and everything was well. She admitted her mistakes, and I could tell she really wished things had been different. I decided not to invite Bella. It wasn't to hurt her, I just couldn't trust her not to cause additional turmoil. Bella texted me after the ceremony, furious about not being included. I simply informed her I didn't want her there and blocked her number. That seemed like a relief, like if I had completed a hard chapter. Unfortunately, approximately 2 months after the wedding, my mother died. She wasn't in pain. She died quietly, with me and Dad by her side. I was grateful for the time I spent with her, even though it was brief. In her final days, she appeared softer and more like the mother I knew. We would sometimes sit in silence, which felt comforting. I was able to say farewell, something I will always appreciate. My mom's funeral was one of the most difficult days of my life. It was a casual gathering of relatives and a few close friends. I wanted to recognize and celebrate her life. Bella was also invited, but we assumed she would not go because she had never contacted us following Mom's death. But on the day of the funeral, she stormed in, demanding to know why she wasn't at the wedding and making everything about her. It became chaotic. Her ranting drowned out the lovely things expressed about my mother. I felt both humiliated and hurt. Dad had reached his limit. He was already struggling after losing his mother. My parents were high school sweethearts. They'd been together for nearly 40 years, and this was plainly the worst thing that had ever happened to him. Bella's selfishness sent him over the edge. He rose up and instructed her to go. He stated that she was insulting Mom's memory and that he never wanted to see her again. The room was fraught with anxiety. Everyone was stunned into silence. I had conflicting feelings. Part of me was happy that Dad had finally faced her, but I was also concerned about the implications. Bella rushed out, complaining about how unfair it was, but I felt it was necessary to save the day from her antics. It felt like a watershed moment for both my father and me. Even though we were not particularly close, we felt that Mom deserved better than a raucous burial. Strangely, this incident brought my father and me closer. Our relationship isn't terrific, and there is certainly some stress, but we've managed to remain civil. He hasn't apologized for his part in everything, but he is now respecting my boundaries and has expressed a desire to have me in his life. We may not be close, but it is tranquil, which is enough for now. Baby steps, I suppose. Being in the position I am in right now feels strange. I used to think I needed a great moment of forgiveness, but now I realize I just needed to let go. Losing my mother was difficult, but it brought me closure. I can keep the pleasant memories of her and leave the rest behind. I do not intend to reconnect with Bella. I've realized that not everyone knows how the difficulties they create can affect others, which is good. I don't need her in my life anymore. Now I'm focusing on my relationship with Mark and creating something positive with him. Finally, I'd like to thank everyone for their support throughout this difficult period. Your warm comments and understanding have meant a lot to me. Sharing my tale has been a relief, and knowing that others care has helped. I appreciate everyone who read my updates and shared their feedback. It really helps to know that I am not alone on this journey. Thank you for being there for me. My mother-in-law constantly demanded money and used my wife for support. My wife defended her, even when she stole from us. My relationship with my wife, Carol, and her mother Eleanor, has been worsening for years. It's a sluggish, grinding problem, the kind that eats away at you gradually. It's reached a breaking point, and I'm not sure what the next move should be. It all comes down to Eleanor's almost infinite feeling of entitlement and Carol's complete inability to confront it, or even accept it, really. To understand the dynamic, some background is required. Carol and I met at a business event around 6 years ago, through a mutual friend. I enjoyed how she was instantly candid and honest about her family's financial history. She mentioned that her family was previously immensely affluent. They had a large house in an elite neighborhood, several costly automobiles, and a lifestyle that frankly, I couldn't understand. But, according to Carol, a succession of catastrophic investments, along with constantly terrible financial decisions, caused them to lose practically everything. She referred to her parents, Eleanor and Richard, as having lavish tastes. They'd buy things they couldn't afford, boats, sports cars, and take out loans they couldn't possibly repay. This debt cycle persisted, she claimed, until they were forced to sell their mansion and relocate to a much smaller condo. Despite this, Carol insisted that her parents had done their best. She insisted they had given her all she could possibly want. However, the story she told me over time showed a very different reality, one that made it difficult for me to connect with her parents. My wife's 17th birthday incident was especially telling. Carol had received a large sum of money as gifts from several family members. Carol claims Eleanor pressured her into turning her the money. She used guilt, claiming that she needed the money more than Carol did, and that Carol did not comprehend the demands of running a household. Carol then learned that Eleanor had used the money to have a professional perm. When Carol, naturally outraged, approached her mother, Eleanor's response was chillingly nasty. She informed Carol that she had always supplied food, shelter, and clothing for her and thus was entitled to the money. Carol's father, Richard, was, in many ways, worse. He had a child outside of his marriage to Eleanor and was legally required to pay child support. However, when Carol started her first job, Richard began asking that she contribute to these payments. He'd constantly pressure her, stating he couldn't afford it and that she needed to support the family. He would also frequently urge Carol to buy him stuff for their condo, a new, larger television, a cutting-edge refrigerator, even if the ones they already had were perfectly adequate. If Carol ever rejected or hesitated, Richard appeared to become hostile. He'd threatened to shatter her phone and laptop, the few things she owned that were genuinely hers. Carol recounted to me these anecdotes with detached grief, as if she had long ago accepted this conduct as usual. Only after she moved out of her parents' condo and into her own little apartment did she feel truly independent, with authority over her own life. My upbringing was the total opposite. My parents, John and Mary, were the salt of the earth. We were not impoverished, but neither were we wealthy. We lived in a modest working-class neighborhood. Dad worked as a mechanic at a neighborhood garage for more than 30 years. Mom worked in a bakery down the street, baking donuts and pastries. They worked so hard to provide for me. They scrimped and saved to ensure that I had all I required for school. They never complained. Never made me feel like a burden. Years later, once I finished college and found a respectable career, I was able to save a large sum of money. My biggest dream, which I had for years, was to buy a house for my parents. A tiny, comfortable home in a quiet area. It was a long-time fantasy that they had never imagined could come true. When I eventually did it, and handed them the keys, my father attempted to refuse. He stated that was too costly and I shouldn't spend my money on them. It took a lot of convincing and earnest pleading before he ultimately agreed. Both were in tears. It was one of the happiest days of my life. After that, they never requested anything from me, despite the fact that I offered to aid them financially on a regular basis. They both took on part-time jobs to keep themselves busy and earn some extra money. They emphasized, with quiet dignity, that parents should care for their children, not the other way around. So you can imagine the culture shock I felt when I first met Carol's folks. It felt like I had entered an entirely new universe. The first experience with Eleanor was unsettling. We were in a restaurant. Carol had planned a meal for us to meet. Eleanor looked me up and down, and her first inquiry was, "So, are you wealthy?" "No, hello. It's good to meet you." Just a direct, blunt question regarding my financial situation. I stuttered about having steady work and making a decent living. Following our initial meeting, Eleanor made it her mission to understand everything she could about my money. She'd ask probing questions that always led back to money. She asked about my insurance plans, financial portfolio, and retirement savings. It was really intrusive, and it made me very uncomfortable. I voiced my worries to Carol, who, to her credit, spoke with her mother. She asked Eleanor to stop. But Eleanor merely changed her approach. She began asking similar questions when Carol was not around, cornering me at family gatherings or calling me personally. One particularly noteworthy occasion came when I casually announced that I had paid off all of my student loans. Eleanor's eyes brightened up. She instantly started into a diatribe about how I should help Carol pay off her bills. Because I was in such a great situation, I had a responsibility to help her. We were just dating at the time. It was an extremely inappropriate suggestion, and it made me feel like I was being treated like a walking ATM. I finally, firmly, told Eleanor that I was uncomfortable discussing my personal money with her and that I would prefer it if she respected my limits. Carol received continuous demands for money. Eleanor would phone Carol several times a week, often more than once a day, to ask for money. The quantities varied, but they were all significant. $1,000 here, $500 there. The pattern was consistently the same. Eleanor would call, often in tears, claiming to have an urgent need, a medical bill, a car repair, a sudden unanticipated expense. Carol, ever the obedient daughter, would express worry while explaining that she was attempting to conserve money. That she couldn't simply keep handing over enormous amounts of money. Eleanor would then embark on a guilt trip. Carol was reminded of all the sacrifices she has made for her. I promised to pay her back. Of course, the payments never arrived. If Carol ventured to bring up the remaining obligations, Eleanor would be furious. She would yell at Carol. Accuse her of being ungrateful, selfish. She didn't appreciate anything her parents had done for her. Then, a few hours later, or perhaps the next day, she'd phone back, crying. I apologized profusely. She claimed to have been really stressed. The cycle would then unavoidably repeat itself a few days later. Another telephone call. Another urgent request for funds. Carol would talk to me about these experiences for hours on end. She'd describe the calls in great detail. But, and this was the most difficult part, if I ever expressed agreement or ventured to condemn Eleanor's actions, Carol would immediately turn against me. She'd snap at me, saying she could complain about her mother while I couldn't. That I did not comprehend their family dynamics. That I had no idea what Eleanor had gone through. It was an infuriating, nonsensical protection mechanism. I eventually got to the point where I couldn't listen to it any longer. I told Carol, as gently as possible, that I loved her but could no longer be her sounding board for these concerns. It was extremely exhausting, and it was straining our relationship. When Carol and I decided to marry, finances, understandably, became a big bone of dispute. Carol desired a lavish wedding. I agreed to pay for it. I had saved diligently and could afford it. However, I also insisted on a prenuptial agreement. It was not a lack of trust in Carol. It was about practicalities. I had seen personally her family's financial turmoil, and I wanted to protect myself by ensuring that our marriage began on a stable, financially secure basis. Carol's reaction was intense. She was highly offended, accusing me of not trusting her and of treating our marriage as a business transaction. She threatened to cancel the wedding totally. She stated that a marriage should be based on love and trust, not formal documents and financial calculations. Eleanor, of course, intervened, escalating Carol's fury. She called me and chastised me for even contemplating a prenup. They told me that their family possessed honor and integrity. I didn't have anything to worry about. During this conversation, I lost my patience. I explained to them, quite forcefully, that Eleanor had a lengthy history of borrowing money from Carol and never repaying it. Her claim to familial honor seemed extremely empty. Both Carol and Eleanor were outraged. Carol packed her bags and departed. She moved out of our apartment, claiming that I had insulted her family, that I did not love her. I was devastated. I tried constantly to convey that my purpose was not to doubt her loyalty or commitment, but only to protect our shared interests. To guarantee that we came into our marriage with clear eyes and expectations, free of any potential asset conflicts. She would not listen. A week later, she arrived at my door uninvited. She was crying and begged me to take her back. She said she'd made a terrible mistake. She told me that Eleanor and Richard had asked that she start giving them her wages so they could manage her finances more effectively. It was then, she claimed, that she realized the magnitude of their manipulation. She agreed to the prenup. So we reconciled, and the wedding planning proceeded. The wedding itself was an experience. We had no option but to invite Eleanor and Richard. It was essential to Carol, and I wanted to make her happy. However, their attendance, as well as their reaction to the wedding's size, constituted a watershed moment. They were visibly surprised by how well the event went. Following the wedding, Eleanor's money requests, which had previously been focused mostly at Carol, began to come directly to me. She would phone me, sometimes many times a week, and ask me to purchase her items. She'd ask me to pay for services she used, such as hair appointments, dry cleaning, and shopping expenditures. She'd sometimes just ask for cash without explaining why. I continually tried to convey to her that I was not required to pay for these items. That I wasn't her personal bank account. But she would persist, using guilt, deception, and plain begging to wear me down. She would say she was elderly and fragile. She has no one else to turn to. That as Carol's spouse, I had an obligation to assist her. I caved a couple times early on just to keep the peace. I persuaded myself I could afford it and it wasn't worth the fight. The refrigerator incident was an excellent illustration. Eleanor contacted me unexpectedly and requested that I buy her a new refrigerator. She stated her current one was outdated and unattractive, and she wanted a new stainless steel model with all of the latest features. I pointed out, properly, that her current refrigerator was fully functional. There was no real need for a new one. I questioned why she wasn't approaching Carol or Richard for the money. Her response was irritating. She mentioned that I had a high income. Because I was wealthy, I should be accountable for funding some of her bills. I adamantly rejected it. Eleanor began to cry, screaming into her phone. She told me how disappointed she was in me. How I was failing to fulfill my duty as a husband to my wife. She then called Carol and, using the same manipulative tactics, persuaded her that if I didn't purchase her the refrigerator, Carol would. Carol, who earned substantially less than me, would have to go into her personal resources to fulfill her mother's whim. I eventually relented. I got Eleanor a refrigerator just to shut her up. Then there was the issue with the sweaters. My parents, bless their hearts, had ordered identical sweaters for Carol and myself as an anniversary present. They were hand-knitted with a unique design that my father had helped construct. My father, overjoyed with the present, had texted me images of the sweaters before they were shipped. When the box arrived, I carefully stored it in the garage, planning to surprise Carol on our anniversary. On the day of our anniversary, I went to the garage to get the package. It was gone. I looked everywhere and turned the garage upside down, but it was nowhere to be found. I asked Carol whether she'd seen it, if she'd accidentally thrown it away thinking it was junk mail. She had not. The parcel has simply disappeared? It was puzzling. A month later, I visited Eleanor and Richard at their condo, and the sweaters were hanging in their closet. My parents had sent us hand-knitted monogrammed sweaters with love. I confronted Eleanor, my rage scarcely restrained. She originally denied this. Then she claimed she found the package outside, near our trash cans. After further inquiry, she acknowledged being at our house, looking about in the garage, and seeing the package. She stated she assumed I threw it away. That it was unwelcome. So she had taken it. It was an outright falsehood. An obvious case of theft. I was infuriated. I stated unequivocally that she had no authority to search our possessions. That she stole from us. Her response was astounding. She scoffed, claiming the sweaters were cheap and poorly made. She had actually done me a favor by taking them. She said I should be thankful. I informed her that they were a present from my parents. That they possessed sentimental worth. It did not matter. She just didn't understand it. I took the sweatshirts back. Carol and I departed immediately. On the way home, I anticipated Carol to be as upset as I was. Instead, she defended her mother. She believed Eleanor had simply made a mistake. That I had overreacted. That I had embarrassed her. She said Eleanor had not intended any harm. She was probably bewildered. I could not believe it. Even after Eleanor had been caught red-handed stealing from us, Carol continued to make excuses for her. Then Eleanor called Carol and demanded that she purchase a new dishwasher. It was a totally unneeded expense. Their home consisted of only 2 people. Richard and his buddies spend the majority of their evenings drinking at the local tavern. Carol attempted to reason with her, highlighting the absurdity of the request. But Eleanor insisted. She mentioned that all of their neighbors had dishwashers. She felt ashamed to be the only one on her floor without one. When Carol continued to refuse, Eleanor informed her she wished she hadn't been born. That any other child would be grateful to have such a giving mother. Carol was selfish and ungrateful. Carol was devastated. She spent the remainder of the evening in tears. I had stopped speaking to Eleanor immediately following the sweater incident. But the next day, I got a text from her. She suggested that I step up and support Carol, that I should purchase the dishwasher for her. She had just emotionally attacked her daughter, and now she was asking that I pay for the object that started the whole thing. I ignored the message. I just couldn't engage. I showed Carol the text as, I don't know, proof of her mother's actions. Carol's reply was unfortunately inevitable. She informed me that she had already spent a substantial chunk of her savings to order the dishwasher for Eleanor. She claimed she couldn't bear hearing her mother so angry. Richard's death a few months later was heartbreaking, but it also introduced new challenges. He was discovered lifeless on a street near their unit following a night of heavy drinking. It was an unexpected and shocking loss. Eleanor was naturally devastated. However, the situation suddenly became even more challenging. Richard had accumulated a substantial amount of debt, including loans from shady persons. Loan sharks, essentially. Eleanor was presented with a mound of invoices and threats of harm if she did not pay. She had to sell nearly everything they owned to pay off Richard's debts. She was left with almost nothing. Carol and I considered it, and despite the history and troubles, we decided to take Eleanor in. She had nowhere else to go. It felt right. The humane thing to do. I wondered if this was a chance for a fresh start. Perhaps with Richard gone and Eleanor in a more vulnerable position, she will be more reasonable. I greeted her warmly and made every effort to make her feel at ease. But I noticed Eleanor looking through our possessions. When we left the house, or just in another room, she would rummage through drawers, closets, and boxes. It wasn't obvious, she was cautious. However, I would discover things somewhat out of order. Drawers are not entirely closed, boxes have moved. I challenged her about this multiple times. Every time, she'd make the same lame reason. She was simply inquisitive. She was only glancing around. I requested Carol to speak with her, to define some boundaries. Carol's response was consistently the same. Just let it go. She's going through a hard time. However, it felt like a perpetual invasion of privacy. Then everything started to disappear. Initially, the pieces were small. An ornamental vase. A set of coasters. A few books. Then more valuable stuff started to disappear. Carol's jewelry was in pieces. Strangely, whenever these items went missing, Eleanor would come home from her outings carrying shopping bags, filled with new clothing, new shoes, new accessories. Given her financial circumstances, she had no income. It became increasingly clear that she was selling our belongings to fund her buying spree. She had gathered completely new clothing, filled with beautiful gowns and matching heels, despite not having a discernible source of revenue. I pointed this out to Carol as gently as possible. I voiced my growing suspicions that Eleanor was taking from us. Carol dismissed my concerns. She told me not to focus on her mother. She deserved to reward herself after all she'd been through. I didn't mind Eleanor treating herself in principle. But not using our money? Not by selling our possessions. It was theft. Plain and simple. The incident with my wallet was the final straw. I got home from work early one afternoon. Carol was still in her office. I went to our bedroom to take a shower, as is my custom. When I got out of the shower, I discovered Eleanor standing in our bedroom, near my dresser. She held my wallet in her hand. And she was going through it. I was shocked and speechless for a moment. I yelled at her and demanded to know what she was doing. Why was she in our bedroom? Why was she going through my wallet? She turned bright red and stammered, unable to provide a coherent response. She resembled a child caught with her hand in the cookie jar. I later told Carol about the incident. I expected her to be equally outraged as I was, to finally recognize her mother's actions for what they were. Instead, she minimized it. She assumed Eleanor simply needed some money, that it wasn't a huge problem. She even offered that Eleanor could steal money from my wallet if she needed it. That I need to be more understanding. She accused me of looking down on her family, of condemning them because they were not as wealthy as I was. She said that her family did not grow up in poverty and desperation like mine had. This implies that my upbringing has made me less understanding. That comment stung. It was a low strike that exposed a deep-seated resentment I had not recognized existed. I decided that I needed some space. I went on a walk. A long, aimless walk, attempting to make sense of Carol's response. I could not understand her steadfast devotion to her mother. Even when Eleanor was obviously in the wrong. Even when she stole from us. Carol apologized when I returned home a few hours later. She said she had a firm conversation with Eleanor, telling her not to enter our bedroom again. Not to go through our possessions. I just nodded. I didn't believe it would make a difference. Eleanor has repeatedly demonstrated that she had no regard for boundaries. No consideration for our property. And I was correct. It did not cease. I made precautions to protect my belongings. I added locks to my dresser drawers. On the cabinets in the living room. On the storage crates in the garage. It felt silly to lock away my own belongings in my own home. But it was the only way I could feel any sense of security. Then I arrived yesterday. The result of months of frustration. Of feeling abused and degraded. Carol called me at work, frantic. She had gone home for lunch, as she often did, to check on Eleanor. But Eleanor was gone. Not just out for a walk or a shopping expedition. Her belongings were also gone. Her clothing. Her personal effects. It's all gone. Carol, understandably worried, began looking around the house. Trying to figure out what happened. And that's when she made her discovery. Her credit card, which she always carried in her wallet, was missing. A considerable percentage of her jewelry, including precious antiques, was also gone. Eleanor didn't answer her phone. Carol was frightened that Eleanor would use her credit card. That she would pawn the jewelry. She begged me for aid. My instant response, the only rational one in my mind, was to call the cops. Report Eleanor's activities as theft. Carol reacted angrily. She claimed she couldn't possibly denounce her own mother to the police. That was unimaginable. She accuses me of being unhelpful. Of not caring about her emotions. And that is where I am currently. And, I'm just exhausted. Drained. I feel like I'm constantly up against Eleanor's entitlement and Carol's supporting conduct. I advised calling the police because that is what happens when someone takes from you. It's the logical and reasonable path of action. But Carol considers it a betrayal. So, AITA? Am I wrong to advise that we involve the police? Isn't that the usual protocol in such cases? I honestly don't know what else to do. Update 1. The response has been tremendous, to say the least. I sincerely appreciate your support. And I didn't expect so many people to weigh in. Many of you have pointed out Carol's troubling behavior. And honestly, I see it too. I do. The reality is, we rarely encounter problems. It occurs virtually exclusively when Eleanor is present. It's becoming evident that I need to have a serious discussion with Carol about this situation. As long as Eleanor is a constant presence in our life, this pattern of boundary violations and Carol's inability to enforce them will unavoidably continue. Update 2. I had that chat with Carol. I even showed her this post, hoping that an outside perspective would be helpful. It did not go well. She is really upset, alleging that the comments are unjust and judgmental. She grew highly defensive, claiming that anyone would support their parent regardless of the circumstances. She also felt betrayed since I had shared such a private topic online. I tried to clarify that my objective was only to determine whether contacting the police was the best line of action. But she didn't respond. She's fully blaming me, and I'm not sure why she can't understand Eleanor's role in all of this. Update 3. After a week, Carol finally received communication from Eleanor. It turns out that Eleanor pawned part of the stolen jewels. She claims to crave independence. That she is tired of living with us because she feels restrained in her actions. Carol threatened to contact the police if the remaining jewelry was not returned. But Eleanor appears completely unfazed. Carol is now urging me to interfere. To talk with Eleanor. To try to reason with her. I strongly informed Carol that I would be staying out of it. To my surprise, Carol has now blamed me for Eleanor's leaving. Claiming I made her feel unwelcome. I'm actually speechless at this moment. Update 4. After some time, I took the painful decision to file for divorce. Many of you undoubtedly expected this conclusion, and I must admit that I wish I had recognized the necessity sooner. Carol was able to block the credit card after Eleanor stole her possessions. However, the retrieval of the valuables proved difficult. I reaffirmed my suggestion to involve law enforcement, but she flatly refused. She then had the arrogance to ask me to replace the stolen jewelry. What's her reasoning? Eleanor took it, and I allegedly made Eleanor feel uncomfortable, thus it was my job to acquire replacement jewelry. All because she refused to contact the cops. I flatly refused? I informed her I had finished. With her. With her family. With the overall toxic condition, a heated dispute ensued, during which she made some extremely cruel remarks about my parents. I told her to go. She was extremely upset and accused me of being unjust. I told her to pack her items. And she departed, cursing me, and went to dwell with Eleanor. Update 5. Since Carol's departure, she and Eleanor have been constantly contacting me. Carol even contacted my parents. Thankfully, my parents are not like hers. Carol was told by my mother that she trusted my judgment even if she did not know all of the details. It has been a huge relief to have their support. I haven't told them the complete tale yet, but I plan to. I'm meeting with a lawyer today to discuss the divorce proceedings. I've already followed some of your advice and changed the locks. I have also bought security cameras, which I will install this week. I'm not sure if Eleanor or Carol will try anything, but I think it's important to be prepared. Update 6. Eleanor was detained as the situation developed over the course of 2 months. She had been stalking people. Arriving at my employment. When I went out with buddies. It was quite stressful. On one occasion, she hurled a drink at me, spoiling an otherwise nice shirt. I tried to be cordial, but her conduct only got worse. She started showing up at my residence, even threw pebbles at my windows. Today, she crossed a line. She broke my bedroom window. I phoned the cops. I had no other option. I simply could not take it any longer. Carol is predictably enraged. She maintains that I should have handled the situation quietly. Eleanor is going through a difficult time. I did laugh. I informed her that Eleanor deserved the repercussions of her behavior. Carol has now demanded that I forgive Eleanor. After everything. The stalking. The harassment. Property damage. Forgiveness is not an option. I finally told my parents the whole nature of the problem. They were startled that I hadn't informed them sooner. And they completely support my decision to proceed with the divorce. I warned them to be cautious, although I doubt Eleanor or Carol will target their property given the distance. Carol eventually bailed Eleanor out of jail. I made it clear to Carol that she was responsible for covering the expense of the window repair. Alternatively, I would seek legal action. She and Eleanor eventually agreed to pay for the damages. Final update. The divorce is final. It is officially over, and it feels extremely liberated. It's as if a weight has been lifted, and I can now breathe freely. My now ex-wife attempted to obtain spousal maintenance and made a move for my assets. However, the prenuptial agreement fulfilled its goal. It shielded me. She argued. She pleaded. However, her efforts proved useless. Anyone thinking about getting married should strongly consider a prenuptial agreement. It may be an awkward topic, but it is very necessary. It requires planning and preparedness. That brings this chapter of my life to a close. I spent 5 years being a devoted stepfather, but my wife's child constantly disrespected me, insisting that I was nothing to him. You are nothing to me. You are nobody. So when it came to paying for college, I urged him to let his true father pay for it. I never expected to share my tale, but I needed to get it off my chest. My name is Robert, and I'm 45 years old. I operate a highly successful elite wine bar in town that I constructed entirely from scratch and am really proud of. That pub introduced me to someone 5 years ago, or so I thought at the time. Melissa was a bookkeeper I recruited to assist with the financial aspects of my firm. She was intelligent, efficient, and exuded a subtle elegance that captivated me. She was more than just adept at her profession. She had a lovely personality. Something that made spending late nights reviewing financial reports a little less tiresome. At first, we kept it professional. She was new to the team, and I didn't want to overstep. But as the weeks progressed, I found myself staying in her office a little bit longer. Making excuses to check on her work, just to be near her. Finally, I made the first move. "Let me take you to dinner," I said one evening after we had done studying the books. She hesitated briefly before smiling. "Are you asking as my boss or as a man?" "As a man." That supper led to another and another. And before I knew it, we were discussing our future together. Everything looked amazing. Melissa was attentive. Her kid, Ethan, was nice and courteous. And I felt as if I had finally discovered the family I'd always desired. We got married after 1 year of dating, and Melissa and Ethan moved into my house. At first, things went smoothly. I basically jumped right into being the greatest stepfather I could be. I accompanied Ethan to sporting events, assisted him with school tasks, and ensured he had all he required. I paid for family vacations, bought him all of the latest sneakers he desired, and did everything I could to provide him with the life I hoped I had when I was younger. He would see his father from time to time. To be honest, Knowing what I did in the past did not make me feel completely at ease. According to what I knew, Kevin had virtually burned down their old flat several times while drunk. This is why he lost custody in the first place. But Melissa urged that Ethan retain that connection. He's still his father, she would remark when I expressed my concerns. Ethan needs to know his dad still cares about him. I saw him at a school event once, and he didn't appear sober. There was something about the way he swayed while standing still. His eyes were unable to focus. But I kept my mouth quiet. After all, who am I to interfere? I was only the stepfather, correct? God, I wish I had known then what I know now. If only I had known then that my desire to be the ideal stepfather could have blinded me to what was really going on. But hindsight is 20/20, right? And the real crisis hadn't even started, not even close. Time went by, and Ethan turned 18 years old. Both his birthday and graduation were approaching. And this made him walk around the house like a frightened wreck. He constantly said, "What if something goes wrong? What if people don't come? What if this isn't perfect?" One evening, when I noticed him overthinking, I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Hey, everything is fine," I said to him. "As a matter of fact, I've got a brilliant idea. Why don't we hold your party at the bar? We can reserve the best section in the house." His eyes immediately brightened up. I knew my wine bar had become a popular destination in town. And Ethan had been eager to show it off to his friends. "Really?" he asked, already reaching for his phone. "Oh my God, my Instagram is going to be insane. Everyone at school is going to be so jealous." I threw myself into preparations. I wanted things to be perfect for him. I even brought him shopping for a designer suit, a sleek black one that made him look like a junior businessman. He looked every bit the young professional in the suit. I nodded, indicating my approval. "How many guests do you think you're going to invite?" I inquired one evening as we were discussing the details. He fiddled with his phone for a time, appearing to hesitate. "About 30 people." "Great. Can you send me a guest list so that I can make sure we have enough space and food for everyone?" "Oh, I don't really have one yet," he replied swiftly. "Just plan for 30, okay?" In retrospect, I wish I had advocated for the list. But I was so focused on getting everything ready. The tables were set. The light was golden and pleasant. The atmosphere at Upper West Wine Bar was nothing short of ideal. It had been converted into the perfect location for an 18-year-old's birthday, sophisticated yet youthful, with a carefully curated menu of virgin cocktails and hors d'oeuvres. Ethan looked great in his cut black suit, standing alongside a group of his pals, laughing and taking photos. Melissa's family was present, socializing with his classmates, and everything appeared to be going perfectly. Then he walked in. I recognized Kevin even before he spoke. He swayed unevenly with each step, his eyes hazy. He wasn't sober. "I'm here to wish my son a happy birthday," he exclaimed loudly, catching the attention of the attendees. I was sitting next to Ethan when his father came over to our table, his expression filled with disdain. "Get up," he mumbled, waving his hand dismissively. "That's my seat. I'm his real father, not you." My voice remained calm and measured. "There is ample seating with the other guests at the next table. Why don't you join them?" "No." This time, his voice was sharper, nearly growling. "This is my place. You need to leave." "My place? Who do you think you are?" I expected Melissa to interfere. To do something? Anything? To calm the situation. But she sat there, pale, staring down at her hands, as if they contained the solutions to all her problems. I took a deep breath and braced myself. It was Ethan's night. I wasn't going to let it get fully wrecked when I could avoid it. "Let me be crystal clear," I continued, my gaze fixed on Kevin's. "You have two options. Take a seat at the next table with the other guests, or have security escort you out." His face contorted in rage. "Oh, listen to you, Mr. Moneybags, throwing his weight around?" He spat, swaying slightly as he leaned on the table's edge for support. "You think you can buy everything, don't you? Buy my son? Buy my family's love?" Other guests began to stare. I could see some of my regulars at surrounding tables, pretending to seem uninterested but plainly paying attention to every word. My workers lurked around the room's boundaries, waiting for my cue. "You just waltz in here with your fancy bar, your big house." Kevin spat again, his voice rising with each sentence. "Think you can replace me just because you've got money? Well, guess what? You can't buy family." And before anyone could react, he reached out and threw a dish of charcuterie to the floor. The crash of glass broke the sudden dead silence of the bar. And then, another, and another. Fine cheeses and cured meats were strewn across the pricey marble flooring, A bottle of imported sparkling water tipped over and spilled upon the beautiful wood of the bar. I got my security team's attention and gave them a modest nod. They moved in smoothly and professionally, just as they had been trained. "Sir, it's time for you to leave," the head of security stated forcefully, seizing Kevin's arm. I watched them walk him out. His inebriated complaints turned into slurred, unintelligible cries that bounced off the walls before the front door swung shut behind him. Silence. The guest's murmur resumed gradually, however. I rose and smiled brightly like my owner. "Really sorry about this, ladies and gentlemen. Please, let the evening go on. Drinks are on the house." It didn't bother the regulars. They were used to it. After a few minutes, they returned to their chats. But at our table, Ethan's friends and relatives sat down. The whispers were incessant. I could see them cast glances toward Ethan, Melissa, and me. By dawn, the tale would have spread widely on social media. Ethan sat up straight and moved the food on his plate about. The sleek outfit that had previously made him appear so grown up now seemed to swallow him, making him small and defenseless. The Instagram-perfect celebration he had envisioned had swiftly turned into a nightmare. After about an hour, he moaned, "I have a headache, can we go home?" The party ended shortly after that. People offered polite excuses, but I could hear them whispering as they went. "Poor Ethan. Did you see his dad? Can you believe what happened?" Ethan went to his room as soon as we entered the house. I followed the girls upstairs and entered his room to speak with him. "Say something." The next morning. The morning after the catastrophic birthday celebration, Ethan arrived at breakfast with circles under his eyes. He sat down in his chair, his gaze focused on his lap. "How are you feeling, buddy?" I inquired kindly. "Fine," he mumbled into his cereal dish. And that was all. One word. The next days felt like I was living in a haunted house. Ethan, who used to be active and gregarious, had become almost unrecognizable. Every time I entered a room where he was conversing with Melissa, he would go silent, as if someone had pressed the mute button. One evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, I attempted to discuss it with Melissa. "Don't you think we should do something? Maybe get him to talk to someone?" She waved her hand dismissively. "He's fine. He's just processing what happened. Give him space." But it wasn't okay. None of this was okay. Despite the stress in our household, we all went to Ethan's graduation ceremony. Melissa and I sat in the crowd, and when his name was called, I applauded so hard that my hands hurt. He looked terrific in his cap and gown. And for a minute, as he looked our way and smiled, I thought, maybe things were finally improving. Of course, we had a party later at our house. I knew I needed to do everything correctly. His favorites were all present. Truffle fries. Steak sliders. He would regularly take small crab cakes from the rear of the kitchen at the bar. Even the absurd 3-tiered chocolate cake, which should have taken at least a week to perfect. His classmates arrived, and for a time, the house was filled with laughing and exciting conversation about college plans and summer getaways. For a few hours, everything seemed almost normal again. Ethan smiled. "Talking. He looks like his old self." I began to relax. I wondered if we'd turned a corner. Then his phone rang. Ethan stepped out into the hallway to answer it, and when he returned a few minutes later, there was something strange about his expression. A peaceful resolution. He approached me directly, for the first time in days, with any degree of willingness. "My dad is coming over," he added. "He wants to congratulate me on graduating." My stomach sank. "Absolutely not," I responded without hesitation. The memories of his birthday calamity are still too clear. "Ethan, think about what happened at your birthday. He showed up drunk. Caused a scene. Destroyed property. That was your fault," Ethan interrupted me, his voice rising. "None of that would have happened if you had just moved and let him sit down. He's my real dad. You should have just stepped aside." I stood there, feeling as if I'd been punched in the stomach. All the time. After several days of stillness? Was this what he had been thinking? Was I the one to blame? I turned urgently to Melissa. I was hoping, for once, that she would say something. Simply step up. Be the mother that Ethan needed. I said, "Please, Melissa. Tell him how inappropriate his father's behavior was at the birthday party." But she sat there, looking at her hands, as if they held the mysteries of the cosmos. The same quiet. Same cowardice. The same thing I saw in the wine bar that night. Something inside of me cracked. 5 years of being the ideal stepfather. 5 years of treading on eggshells. 5 years of making excuses for everyone else's actions. 5 years of enduring frustration, and everything started gushing out. Listen to me, Ethan, I replied clearly and firmly. That was my wine bar. I set that whole party up for you. I got you that damn designer suit you wanted. I did absolutely everything to make that night perfect. And your dad? He arrived drunk. Publicly shamed you. And now has property damages. He didn't even get you a present, Ethan. All he did was bring chaos and embarrassment. In an instant, Ethan's expression changed from angry to furious. No. Ethan's face changed from angry to furious in an instant. Oh my God, here we go again, he exclaimed, throwing up his hands. It's all about the money with you, isn't it? I paid for this, I bought that? You think because you have money, you can control everything. He turned to face his classmates, who were standing awkwardly in the living room, clearly wishing they were somewhere else. My real dad will be here soon, he remarked with a sour laugh. It'll be nice to finally have a normal person here instead of this. He motioned toward me as if I were some filth he had stepped on. Your father is not coming into this house, I attempted to explain, adjusting my voice to counteract the rising rage and hurt within me. That was when Ethan completely lost it. His face turned red, and he started ranting at me in front of the entire crowd. You're not my dad, he yelled. You're nothing to me, you're nobody. Who do you think you are to tell me what to do? Keep your nose out of my life, you're just some guy my mom married for his money. The room fell completely silent. I could see his friends fidgeting uncomfortably, some checking their phones, some staring at the ceiling. Ethan went back to them, his voice venomous. Let's get out of here. I don't want to celebrate in his house anyway. He underlined his as if it were filthy. His friends hurriedly filed out, without making eye contact with me. The front door slammed so hard that the windows trembled. I stood there. Alone. In my own apartment. Surrounded by discarded food and strewn dishes. Hit by a simulated truck. This had to be it. It needed to be enough. Melissa would eventually, at last, say something? Would she defend me after this? Mel? Melissa cleared her throat. She spoke coldly, detached. You had no right to throw the house and money in his face like that, she told him bluntly. You didn't need to remind him this is your house, that your money pays for everything. That was low. I stared at her. I saw her for the first time. You've got to be kidding me right now. Where were you when your ex was hurling plates across my wine bar? Where were you just now, when your son stood up in front of his entire graduating class and started screaming insults at me? Melissa simply shook her head. As if I were the insane one. You're the adult here, she retorted. You should know better than to get into an argument with a teenager. I gave out a sour laugh. And you should know better than to bury your head in the sand like a coward, I said. But that's what you do, isn't it? You just sit there silently while your ex-husband and your son treat me like garbage. Well, guess what? I'm done being everyone's punching bag. Melissa's expression darkened. She didn't say anything. She turned and began walking upstairs. A few minutes later, I heard the slam of the guest room door. The next morning breakfast seemed like a funeral. Melissa sat across from me, pushing scrambled eggs aimlessly around her plate while avoiding eye contact. I was just about to rise and leave the table when Ethan burst into the kitchen. Still dressed for last night's graduation celebration. I detected his beer breath somewhere between his door and the table. I looked sideways at Melissa, waiting for something. Anything. Her teenage son reeked of alcohol. Coming home at 9 a.m. However, as was often the case, she said nothing. She only stared at her plate. Where have you been all night? I inquired neutrally. Ethan turned to face me, his bloodshot eyes filled with hate. None of your business, he scoffed. You're not my dad. You're not anyone. Just some empty space taking up room in this house. Then he turned and staggered upstairs to bed. Melissa just sat there. Once again, there was silence. By this point, I was beginning to believe that silence was some kind of superpower she possessed. The week that followed was like trying to live in a house haunted by the poltergeist from hell. Ethan would not speak to me directly. Instead, he would speak about me as if I were not present. Dad, he'd tell Melissa, pointing to me as if I were a piece of furniture. Can you ask your husband to pass the salt? Or he'd walk into a room and tell his mother, this guy is in my way. And then simply stand there, waiting for me to move. I said nothing. I kept watching. 5 years. I'd wasted 5 years trying to be the ideal stepfather. Now, I was out. Let them show their true colors. And boy, was I prepared for a show and tell. Sunday. Melissa and I sat down for another silent dinner. Then Ethan burst into the dining room, waving an envelope around as if he'd won the lottery. "Dad, I got in," he exclaimed, almost jumping up and down. "NYU accepted me. I got into my dream school." I saw him run up to Melissa and hug her tightly. They were both grinning ear to ear. Ethan then turned to her and, with a sneer that I will never forget, said, "Tell your husband he needs to pay for my tuition." Something inside me has just snapped. I smiled, but it was not a warm, pleasant smile. A chilly and sharp one. "I won't be paying for your college education," I stated emphatically. "You've made it very clear that I'm not your father. I'm nobody, remember? Well, guess what? This nobody's wallet is closed. Why don't you ask your real dad to pay for college?" Ethan's cheeks became an awful shade of red. "You vindictive piece of—" He began shivering, tears welling in his eyes. But I didn't feel anything. "You're doing this to punish me. You're just evil." I stood there, strangely calm as he screamed insults at me. It was like witnessing a hurricane from a window. I could see the turmoil, but it couldn't affect me anymore. "Mom!" Ethan exclaimed to Melissa. "Make him pay. He has to pay." Melissa cleared her throat, adopting the patronizing tone I had come to despise. "Come on, honey, quit joking around," she told me. "You know you need to pay for Ethan's education." I pulled back my chair and stood up. I've made myself perfectly clear. I will not pay tens of thousands of dollars in tuition for someone who spent weeks telling me I'm nothing to him. Someone who treats me as if I don't exist in my own home. Then I turned and left the dining room. Ethan's shrieks followed me up the stairs. I could hear him having what sounded like another epic tantrum. Plates crash. Chair scraping. Theatrical sobs. Like father, like son, I reasoned bitterly. I sat in my bedroom, listening as the ruckus downstairs gradually subsided. But I knew it was not over. Melissa would be up shortly, eager to play a role in this family drama. Sure enough, approximately 30 minutes later, my bedroom door flew open. Melissa stormed in. Red-faced with rage. "I'm sick of it," she exclaimed at me. "Sick of you and your games? You need to grow up and pay for Ethan's education." I glanced at her calmly from where I sat on the bed. "No. You and your ex can figure out how to pay for NYU. I'm sure between the two of you, you can work something out." Melissa's jaw constricted. She began pacing the room, like a caged animal. "You're being completely selfish. He's just a teenager, for God's sake. You're the adult here, you need to be the bigger person," I observed her, remembering. She had used the same reasoning each time. "Be the bigger person, Robert. Let it go, Robert. He's just a kid, Robert." Constantly making excuses? They were always smiling, nodding, and opening my wallet while treating me like dirt. I took a big breath and gently exhaled. "A teenager who's old enough to know better," I remarked gently. "An adolescent has made it abundantly apparent how he thinks about me. Why should I invest in his future when he has only shown me contempt?" Melissa paused her pacing and gently turned toward me. Her expression was frigid. "Fine then. Let me make this simple for you. Either you pay for Ethan's education, or I'm filing for divorce." She obviously expected me to cave, break down, cry, or beg her not to leave. To pay immediately. That is what the better man would do, correct? I shrugged. "Okay. Get divorced." Her expression was almost comical. Her mouth opened and closed several times, but no words emerged. Apparently, she did not expect me to call her bluff. "I'll call my lawyer first thing in the morning," I stated with a stern voice. "Until then, you and Ethan can start finding yourselves a new place to live." Melissa said nothing. She just stood there, staring at me, almost for the first time. Finally, without another word, she turned and walked out, silently closing the door behind her. The next morning, I came downstairs to find Ethan sitting at the dining table, waiting for me like an ambush. The scene was masterfully staged. Ethan has red-rimmed eyes. Melissa, with her finely honed expression of concerned authority. Melissa murmured, "Honey," with that deceitful smile I'd never noticed before. "We've all had a chance to calm down and think about things." Ethan nodded profusely, resembling a well-bred puppet. "We all just overreacted yesterday," he continued, his voice thick with honey. I paused in the doorway, a peculiar sense of clarity sweeping over me. It was like I was seeing them both for the first time. I really see them. Melissa went talking, her voice adopting the reasonable tone she often used when she desired something. "We're family. Families fight, but they also make up. And since you were the one who escalated things with this whole college situation, It would mean a lot if you took the first step toward reconciliation. Ethan jumped in on cue. Yeah, and if you helped with tuition, it would show that you're really sorry and want to make things right. I nearly laughed. They genuinely believed they could influence me so easily. That all it would take was some staged remorse and scripted phrases about family. Actually, I said as I reached for my cell, I just got off the phone with my lawyer 5 minutes ago. The divorce papers should be ready by this afternoon. Their expressions shifted in an instant. Ethan's phony smile evaporated, leaving his face stunned. Melissa's face flushed a familiar angry red. I turned to Ethan. Congratulations, I stated frankly. You won't have to deal with your not dad interfering in your life anymore. Isn't that what you wanted? Ethan burst into tears. This time, they're real. Not the calculated ones from earlier. But I was tired of being deceived by teenage tears. Melissa rushed to her feet so quickly that her chair nearly collapsed. She stormed upstairs without saying another thing. Moments later, I heard her yanking drawers open and slamming closet doors. They packed in complete silence. No more harsh speeches? No more insincere apologies. Just the sound of luggage being stuffed and doors slamming. I believed it had finally ended. I was mistaken. The messages began that same night. First, from Melissa. We all said things we regret. Let's talk about this like adults. Then from Ethan. I am so sorry if I hurt your feelings, but you are really being totally unfair about college. When I said nothing, the text became more harsh. You are being obstructive and destroying this family. I hope you enjoy being all alone with your money. You'll be sorry later when you're old and alone with nobody. I said nothing. I made sure there was a prenuptial agreement, so the divorce was speedy. Melissa naturally tried to oppose it. But my lawyer handled it swiftly. She received nothing. Not 1 penny of my wine bar's income. Not a single penny from my savings. I still hear about them from common friends. They live in a little apartment across town. Ethan couldn't afford NYU and now works in a mall. Melissa is striving to resume her accounting profession, but things aren't going well. Since then, I've redecorated the house. I got rid of all the furniture that reminded me of them. The space feels larger these days. Lighter, somehow? Or maybe it's just me. Finally liberated from the burden of attempting to purchase affection from those who were only interested in selling.